Computer. I believe we are now recording. Does it say that it's recording on your end? Okay, I can edit that out. Okay. Yo. Welcome to the latest and the greatest at the Yonko table. This is not Grandmaster Hoop or Dr. Jace Attorney. This is Dr. Rika, who has taken over the podcast with my co-host here to talk about movies in 2022. You'd like to introduce yourself?
Yes, it is Admiral Hooper TV. I don't know, we've tied up the Yonkos, we've thrown them in the hole, and we've taken I don't know, like staged a little mutiny. Like we're the captains now. So we're gonna kind of run the ship for this episode. And kind of like give like a broad overview of not just kind of like nerd culture leaning movies, stuff like that. Kind of like we're kind of like gonna cover the whole shebang in a way. So we'll speak towards some superhero movies. We'll speak towards like more awardsy, maybe some more highbrow indie films, and kind of just speak towards like I guess the film industry as a whole.
So how'd you feel about 2022 as far as movies go?
So we're starting there. So I don't want to start negative. So I'm going to try to say this as gently as possible. I'll say this. I thought 2021 was like just like a really good year for movies. And I think in part because the pandemic in 2020, a lot of things were like pushed back. It just felt like we got like a really eclectic group. There were so many things I connected with. And then it kind of ended with like Spider-Man No Way Home. Yeah, and I don't know. So 2021 was just like a really good year for me in terms of movies. 2022, not that I was like disappointed, because I did have like plenty of fun. I saw plenty of movies. And there was movies I really did connect with and movies I loved that'll be in like kind of like my pantheon of all time and like definitely like this decade. But I feel like there wasn't as many as 2021. I don't want to go as far to say as a weak year. But it just kind of felt like the awardsy movies weren't quite hitting me as hard, and I was kind of overall really disappointed with like the blockbuster offerings this year. How do you feel, Dr. Rika?
I feel pretty similarly. I felt there were some high highs and then kind of a middling middle. There's not much going on in terms of like a mid-budget type film that you could pop on. There were a few, but not many. I think there's some really wonderful like international features and some pretty good indie films, but it didn't feel like, I think 2019 was the most recent year I can remember of like just a really stellar year, like across the board. Some really wonderful movies in 2019. 2020, I think understandably, because of the impact of the pandemic, things being pushed back. I can understand why things maybe weren't, especially then after a really wonderful year of 2019, that things weren't as that didn't feel as strong. In 2021, it felt like an uptick, and 22 felt like we were going down a little bit more again. So there were some disappointments for me of things that I was looking forward to seeing this year, but then also things that I didn't expect to actually really, really enjoy and like. So I think it's been kind of a weird year.
It's definitely been kind of all over the place. And I know we're going to get into this kind of like some like overall themes and stuff like that. Because it's like there was like many kind of like bits and pieces. Where do you want to start? How can we speak about like this year as a whole? Like
where do we start? I know you mentioned kind of the blockbusters being a bit disappointing, and considering most of the podcast episodes tend to cover like pop culture and superhero films and the bigger budget like blockbusters, they struggled. I think we'll talk about the one that felt most successful in Top Gun Maverick, but as far as like superhero, Marvel-esque, DC, etc., it was pretty lukewarm in terms of money intake. I don't think any of them have crossed 1 billion worldwide, but also just
Yeah.
in terms of like enjoyment. I think a lot of folks either didn't go and see some of the films or did and felt disappointed. I fall in some of them I liked, some not so much.
Hmm.
But there wasn't as much fanfare as I would say previous years, and I'm curious about just like the superhero fatigue idea because we're getting so much from not only films but like TV shows. Lots of discourse continues as far as social media on this idea of like, is our superhero films kind of quote ruining the industry, or they even cinema in the first place? But I think anyone who was a defender of superhero films this year didn't have too much to work with in terms of building their argument in
No,
support.
no, it was tough. I think it was tough for a lot of those defenders, sort of what you're
Mhm.
saying. I think, where to start? I think honestly to start, like I think I really like the Batman. I thought the Batman was like a cool take. Like I thought Matt Reeves did a really cool, interesting job with his own take on the Batman. I thought Robert Pattinson, like as the emo Bruce Wayne, was like cool and like his own kind of like was able to stand out amongst like a long list of great actors portraying Bruce Wayne. I thought that one was cool, and I felt like that was kind of like outlier, an
Mhm.
outlier in the kind of overall superhero scene. And it was like almost an exception to the rule. And it felt like throughout the year, there was like each of the movies were like had moments and ideas that like I was interested in, but like overall just like kind of failed to like kind of bring it all home. Like, there was a lot I liked in Doctor Strange. I thought Sam Raimi was like able to bring like a lot of like his own like kind of like expertise in terms of special effects. And I thought when it became like a bit of a scary movie, when like Wanda's like
The
trekking
villain, yeah.
through, yeah, and she's like trekking through like the sewers or like the underground passageway, like genuinely terrified, but like there was like a lot in that movie where I was like, I don't know about this, and I couldn't like walk away being like, oh, that's like one of the MCU's best. I couldn't do it. Similarly, I mean, there wasn't a lot in Love and Thunder. And then I could probably do a whole podcast on my thoughts towards Wakanda Forever,
Mhm.
but also just like really overall, like I was kind of really disappointed with that film. I had like a lot of expectations, and it just felt like they were trying to almost do too much, I think is my short kind of
Mhm.
take on that. But in terms of like the discourse, I think, I think a lot of our listeners heard it like on this podcast. But I think it actually played out in terms of what Marvel and DC are going forward. We saw in the middle of this year, like as much as like discourse was around, like Kevin Feige felt the need to come out and say, hey guys, this is an interesting time. Phase 4 is ending now. Phase 5 and 6 are coming. Here's like the whole like
Hear the
vision of
plan.
the future.
Yeah.
And it was kind of weird. It felt like a little bit of like maintenance he was trying to do,
Mhm.
um, in a way. And then you saw like with DC kind of announcing James Gunn is like kind of being their own Kevin Feige and kind of like his plans. We've seen that like kind of the last couple of weeks, So, as much as it was like we felt it on screen, like there are things happening behind the scenes that are
Mhm.
also showing that like this wasn't a strong year for superhero movies.
Yeah. And just a quick plug that each of these movies have been covered by the podcast previously. So go ahead and listen to those episodes. But I
Absolutely.
think even times in which we had talked about the films when they first came out, a lot of us were feeling the same way of like
Mm-hmm.
having some disappointment. I think there were some cool ideas. I appreciate the risk taking and trying to be more creative on how we like put out a superhero film, like making something that is more horror, trying to inject some humor, things that feel like more emotionally resonant with Wakanda Forever. I don't think all the ideas worked out though. Um, so I think part of me was like, I would like to see hero films like expand, but I don't know if this is how I imagined it would go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and considering I am a Marvel and DC fan and I appreciate just kind of being in that world, There was just disappointment on my end, and then also I did start to feel the fatigue of like, okay, I need to get myself to the theater and watch it and give it a chance. But then walking out feeling like, did that feel like a good time for me? I
Yeah.
think when I walk into something that's a blockbuster, ultimately, like the top thing for me is like, am I having a good time? I'll speak to, I did have a good time with Top Gun Maverick, and that's like my like blockbuster of the year, like
Yeah.
contender of like I walked out, I was like, yeah, that's
That
a
was fun.
movie. Like that was a
Yes.
blast for 2 hours plus of just like that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to make me feel something in terms of like exhilaration or excitement.
Hmm.
I go to other movies to feel other things, and then it's a bonus if I get both of those things in one movie at the same time, which I think there's another film I could speak to that did offer me that. But yeah, I think my hope is that we'll go into a better direction come 2023. Uh, what is on the slate first is Ant-Man. Is that correct?
Yeah. When you talk about the fatigue, I'm like, I mean, I've never been a Marvel completionist. I think I missed Ant-Man, the first one, and was kind of okay with it. And then I didn't see the second one and was kind of okay with it. And like, just like, I don't even know if somebody like told me like the overall plot. They're like, oh, Ant-Man's really good. But I was just kind of like, oh, it's fine. Um, and so like, but like, I think the fatigue really set in this year where I didn't catch one of the TV shows. I've heard,
Mhm.
yeah, I think I've heard good things, I've heard mixed things about Moon Knight. And I've heard mixed things about all of them, and I just like never got around to watching them. And now, as Ant Man Quantumania
Mhm.
comes around, I'm like once again in this like Ant Man predicament where I'm like, will I make it to the theater? It will be in like a bit of a, I say doldrum, but it also will kind of be in like that Oscar lead up time period where I could just be like in my catch up with my Oscar movies. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, the fatigue feels like it's really, I don't know, it felt like it was like something we hadn't heard about, then it like crept up, and it feels like it's become really mainstream like this past year. And so next year will be very interesting to see how, I don't know, how they kind of like, I don't know, rewrite the ship after what I think a lot of people will consider a lackluster year.
Yeah. I think what'll get me to the theater, if anything, I am a completionist, so I at least want to see all of the movies. I have also not kept up with the TV shows, but Jonathan Majors is someone who's really exciting to me to watch. He has two films next year that are,
Speaking of which, yeah,
yeah, Creed
another
3.
great blockbuster that I'm more excited for. I
Hmm.
don't know. I'm much more excited for Creed 3 than I am
Hmm.
for Ant-Man 3. Um yeah, I don't know. Creed's trailers always like,
They
I
hit.
think they're so good like as trailers alone, and I really do enjoy those movies, enjoy Michael B. Jordan's performances as Adonis, and so I'm really excited for that one.
Yeah, and he's his directing debut as well, the Creed 3.
Yeah.
Michael B. Jordan, yeah. So yeah, I think Jonathan Majors will get me to the theater. We'll see how I feel coming out of it. Um, but I think what the other side of the coin of this idea of like, okay, we're fatigued by this idea of like superhero films, maybe IP in general, in some cases. Uh, we saw a lot of really great original content this year, as
Yeah.
far as things that kind of came out of nowhere, at least for me, of like, I don't think I knew this was happening until it dropped, and then I went to the theater and saw it. I know kind of in creating an outline and thinking of ideas of places we can start, I named some of the films I really liked that were original stories, created by some folks who just had some really good ideas, and they then worked worked really
Mm-hmm.
well. So I have Everything Everywhere All at Once, Barbarian, Turning Red, and RRR is films that I just really enjoyed. In different kind of categories too, as far as like maybe sci-fi fantasy, horror, thriller, action, blockbuster, and then of course animated film on Disney as well. So I'm curious about not necessarily certainly you can talk about your thoughts on these films or just the idea of originality and how much I realized that I craved it, and how excited I was that it existed for this year, and What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, wow, I have plenty of thoughts. I'm sure we could have a good conversation about everything everywhere, just about that movie in particular. But when it comes to originality, I mean, I love it. I think what a lot of people go to the movies for are to kind of like, I don't know, experience something new. I mean, if you want to rewatch something, you know, that's always, you can do that from like the comfort of your own bed, you know what I mean? Like, but I think I don't know, I think I'm the most exhilarated where I'm like, oh, this is like unlike anything I've ever seen. Oh my goodness, this is like drawing out a new emotion for me. This is like, and then I think like art at its best is like when you're like, oh, this is so different. I'm now viewing life in the world differently. And so like I think that's what a lot of people go to the movies for. And so I think that kind of starts with like original movies, original screenplays, original ideas. And I think everything everywhere is like a great example of taking something that's kind of in the ether in terms of like the multiverse,
Mhm.
but like putting your own super imaginative spin on it. And I think I think that was really cool to kind of like see it connect with like a really broad audience. Like it was in terms of like word of mouth. I think that movie, in terms of just straight word of mouth, in terms of like people talking about it like gaining buzz over time, I think that probably holds the crown for like best word of mouth this year. Top Gun Maverick, I think, probably is up there also.
Mhm.
The numbers kind of back that up. But yeah, no, there was like few films like Everything Everywhere that I think had that like, oh guys, this is like unlike anything. You need to go see it.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was really cool to see. And yeah, I love originality. I love to see them be successful. So we like kind of get more in the future because like we talk about like fatigue, that means we're eating the same thing, and like we do want like new meals, like maybe along with like some of the more
Familiar.
IP. Yeah,
Mhm.
that it's just gonna be around. So
Yes. And it's funny that you talk about like word of mouth because like the four of these films, I had plans to go and see them, but had also heard from other people, whether it be friends or colleagues, say like, "Hey, have you seen this?" Like I'm
yeah,
thinking to Barbarian, I'd known about it. I think I had been mentioned on like a podcast that I was listening to. And then, so in my job, like one of my students had then mentioned, like, yeah, this is something I watched recently and really enjoyed. And they're a big movie fan. It was just something we were chit chatting about. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll check that out. And I think what's really wonderful about each of the or the four of these films and why I mentioned them is because I'd heard about it from somebody else and because folks just didn't explain it. They said, just watch it for yourself, experience it for yourself, and then come back to me. And there's something about that that felt really special compared to, some other films that I've been recommended in the past where you can actually explain the whole plot or what happens, and as compared to like being able to just sit with like the multiverse that's within everything everywhere. Um, or the almost three different types of movies that is within Barbarian, starting with
yeah,
something that's more of like a traditional thriller, and then almost like a comedy, like a horror comedy, and then ending with like a monster-esque type film. Um, that just makes it really enjoyable to go in and not know anything and sit with it. And
watching RRR in particular, like going in so blind. I think like the most I heard it, and I don't remember. I think I had like I'm no hipster or anything, but like I think I'd like come to it pretty early. You know what I mean? Like I think I had like heard one critic kind of like recommend it, who I followed on Twitter or something. So I was just like, oh, it's on like Netflix. It's like such an easy watch. Like 3 hours, that's pretty long, but like got nothing going on this afternoon. Watching that movie for like the first 45 minutes when you're trying to get on its wavelengths was like such a trip. And then when it kind of comes to like, honestly, I think the when they finally show the title screen,
mhm.
um I think it really sets in. It's like, oh, we are like on an epic trip right now. They just spent 45 minutes building up to showing you the title screen, like we're in for a treat. Everybody buckle up. This is about to be a show. That was like one of like, and that was like on my couch watching Netflix. You know what I mean? That was easily, I think, one of my favorite film moments of the year because it was unlike anything else. You know what I mean? It was just so like, it was so fresh. It was so cool. It was so like, oh, they're going for really big here and they are nailing it. That most movies don't even like come close to even attempting. So yeah, no, these are like, I don't know, these original movies, like kind of like getting that blind recommendation, like just go and watch it. Like it really does pay off. I totally agree.
I will say I'd heard about RRR throughout the year and just didn't have the bandwidth to sit for 3 hours. So I did what like the first time I watched it was this week. And so
really?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm off from work. I finally have the time to sit. I really loved it. Similar to you, just this like it goes at 100 the entire way. And the idea of like it being like it's an action film and a musical and like a buddy movie.
When they break out into dancing, also easily. And like it's not like they break out to dance for like a quick, like, 30 seconds or something. It's like it's all right, we are sitting in this scene for like a good 5 to 10 minutes and we're not going anywhere else. Like another great moment. Yeah.
No, it was great. It was great. So yeah, I did watch it this week and really enjoyed it. I think this idea of like there is kind of a superhero-esque element too, as far as like the power of these two figures. And so it's like, yeah, this is how the blockbusters should be. Like just full of energy and completely, I think, giving itself into like what it is. Like I don't think there's this idea of like it didn't take itself too seriously, but it also wasn't like joking the whole time. There was a really nice balance of like some comedy, but also things that felt more emotional. Um, and it just like said, this is what like it felt very confident in what it was. That's the best way that I can describe it.
Those characters at the end felt like the coolest superheroes I'd seen this year. You know what I mean? And I think that's like one of these kind of like, kind of things that I like wished more people kind of like understood was out there. Like, you can get a lot of your like the things you go to superhero movies for, from like these other kind of like maybe projects you don't see coming, but then you get like a lot of like originality with it too. You almost get like everything you were looking for. Like all the multiverse stuff you're looking for from Multiverse of Madness, like you can find in Everything Everywhere, with all this other extra stuff on top. You know what I mean? And if you're looking for like a bombastic, epic kind of like, I don't even know don't even know how to describe RRR because it's so much. But you're looking for a fantastical kind of like adventurous epic journey movie, you can find everything in RRR and like then some. So I think like people, I guess my hope is like if like this fatigue is real and it kind of like settles in, then I think it like leads to both Hollywood kind of like backing more of these movies in terms of like both funding and marketing, but then also audiences kind of like being more aware and kind of like demanding more, because if they demand more, they support these movies more, then you're gonna get more of them, because Hollywood likes to turn a buck, and so they're gonna support what the audiences are consuming. So
yeah, absolutely. And speaking of audiences and what they're consuming and what they're kind of going out and paying for, I think we've seen a shift in terms of animation. I think the highest grossing animated movie this year was Minions. Is that correct? Or Rise of Gru, whatever is that.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. So
well, I was just gonna give you credit for like great segue. I know we're running the ship for the first time. Your segue there was like excellent. So just wanted to shout you out. Yeah, I think Minions is the #1 animated movie of the year. But not only that, I think it's like an outlier. I don't have the numbers pulled up for me right now, but I think like Minions is like, I think grossed over like 900 million worldwide. The second one, I mean, I'm going off the top of my head. I've consumed the box office way too much, but I think it's like DC League of Super Pets is in the 200s worldwide. I think Lightyear might be in the 200s worldwide. Like, so I think there's like I could be forgetting something. I'm unsure where the bad guys kind of landed. I don't know if it did better than Lightyear, but
I looked it up yesterday, and that's why I knew the Minions. Let's see, box office.
Yeah, I think there's like a large gap. So it's like kind of Minions is like in a class of its own, kind of doing its own thing.
Yeah, number 5 worldwide of the year. It is number 5, and the next
animated movie is
looks like The Bad Guys at 16.
Good for the bad guys. Good for the bad guys, but also like, yeah, I'm looking it up now, like 250, like, you know what I mean? It's just like there's like a large gap. Yeah, so this has kind of been a conversation I think like been having in like our group chats, and maybe other people are having this conversation too. Maybe not. But there does seem to be like this like weird shift from which, you know, pre-pandemic, you know, a lot of the animated movies were kind of like, you know, the Disney princess movie, like Moana, like Frozen and Frozen 2 or something, like the biggest like blockbusters. Yeah, period. You know, of the period. You know what I mean? Animated aside, you know, the Minions, the Despicable Me franchise were always up there. I think that Pixar sequels, Incredibles 2 and Finding Dory both grossed $1 billion. Like, you know, animated movies were kind of like, as much as like your superheroes, your big IPs, your Fast and the Furious, like, you know, kind of like the big DreamWorks, the big Disney, the big Pixar movie were kind of like, oh, that'll be another summer blockbuster movie. You know what I mean? And I don't know, we're kind of like seeing a shift, in my personal opinion, in which like Moana didn't do that well last year. Lightyear, like grossing in the 200s is not what these people Siri wanted to speak, you know, are not what these, you know, big animated studios are kind of like looking for. You know, they are looking for like these How to Train Your Dragons that did really well. They're looking for like, you know, the Kung Fu Panda movies. I don't think they're going to be as happy. I think the Sing franchise is really successful as well.
Yeah, I believe so.
You know, there's just been like a pretty big shift, and I'm unsure if it's, you know, could be like pandemic related, could be, I mean, I think my best bet is that it has more to do with like this kind of like, I think, shift in kind of like, I think how parents kind of allow their children to consume content. You know, I think, do you really want to take your child to like get them in the stroller, kind of like buy popcorn, go to the theater, like have them sit down, hopefully everything else goes well at the movie theaters, or do you just want to wait 2 weeks before it arrives on Disney Plus? You know what I mean? Because like that's kind of like how it's been. I think Strange World quickly came to Disney Plus, and I think Turning Red
was simultaneous.
Yeah, I think simultaneously on Disney Plus. And so I think like this, like I think there's been a shift in both how animated movies are kind of released, but also I think in like how parents are like kind of like choosing how they see these movies as well. What are your thoughts on that? I've had like plenty of thoughts.
Yeah. I think it was Encanto last year, not Moana.
Yes,
Encanto, Moana was like a couple of years ago. I only say that because I was teaching a class and my students got there before me and had put on, I'd never used Disney Plus at that point, but they had put on Moana to watch and decided that that's what they wanted to do with their day as they were working on some assignments. So very sweet. All that to say, I agree. I think there's this something I've been thinking about in that parent idea of like, do I want to be able to just spend time at home where we can just make our own snacks and we can be in the comfort of like our own environment and watch a film that either is already dropping on Disney Plus the same time it's coming out in theaters, or will be on Disney Plus, you know, a couple months after it drops in theaters? Or do I want that day out? And so I feel like that's part of it. I think too, similarly to what we were talking about in terms of like some risk taking that maybe didn't pay off for like superhero films. I think I saw some of that with animated films this year too, of like, okay, let's do Lightyear, but it's sort of like a sci-fi film that's going to have a bit more meat to for kids to follow and stick with
Hmm.
than maybe a typical animated film would. Um, in addition to like Strange World, marketing wasn't great. We're not quite sure what we're walking into. All we know is like it's very colorful. Maybe there's
There's a
something to
strange
do.
world.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
something to do with like adventuring.
Yeah.
So I think part of it felt like no one even knew if it was worth it to like go out and sit with some of these films compared to like Minions is really familiar. So we talk about some of that IP and they know what to expect in terms of like some of that. So I think that has something to do with it of some of the more original films this year, maybe not being marketed well enough for folks to actually invest some of the money to do that. I think too, the idea of like things being dropped on VOD or Disney Plus or whatever it may be, Netflix, because I think I'd seen some stuff that had dropped on Netflix or HBO.
Yeah, they have the Wendell and Wild, the
Yeah,
stop motion.
where it's like, oh, it's just much easier for me to just watch it from home.
Yeah.
And all of us are already just here. And so I think that hurts like box office as well, which, is one of our other themes too, is this idea of like streaming versus, being able to actually have a theatric experience. The thing that is interesting though is there are some animated films I really enjoyed this year. And so it does make me a little sad that there wasn't as much like support because I want to see more of those films made. Like I really,
I really
really
liked
love.
Strange World. I really
I
liked Strange World. I
Yeah.
was strangely charmed by it. I was like, okay, yeah, it's it felt like smaller than I think a lot of like kind of like the more epic adventure Disney movies like Atlantis and like Treasure Planet that I think it's been kind of compared to. It's kind of rooted in like a single kind of family and not just like a family, but like a son, a dad, and his dad.
Mhm.
But I was strangely charmed by it. And like I was disappointed to see how poorly it did at the box office. Cause yeah,
Yeah.
um we want people to see good movies, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I don't know, I thought that one was worth people's time.
Yeah, I was charmed by it too. Like the kind of this like intergenerational. I think Disney has been on their generational trauma trip, which
Yeah.
is both a good thing and also I'm like, okay, okay,
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's turning red and what we could go down the line, but I actually
Yeah.
was really charmed by it. And there was like an undercurrent of like talking about ecology and treating, nature and the planet well.
Hmm.
That was like also a part of that story that I found just really enjoyable. As far as like giving kids an introduction to like we should be kind to the world that we have right now because it's the only
Yeah.
one we have right now.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just a really nice message to have within the film. I really love Turning Red for like more nostalgic reasons in terms of like my having been a teenage girl before and what my relationship with my mother looked like and kind of what I was obsessed with as far as boy bands and I still am as an
Hmm.
adult. And so a lot
Yeah.
of that resonated with me. Also introducing kids to just like changes that happen in your body that ultimately then impact how you relate to other people and those changes are okay like that it's a natural part of just who we are as people and so really appreciate that loved Pinocchio so Guillermo del Toro's
Yeah.
stop
Not
motion
Robert Zemeckis.
no
Okay.
I'll be
I
honest
respect.
yeah didn't even watch that one no
I've not seen that
Guillermo
one either.
Uh, yeah. So on Netflix, stop motion came back, but they had two drops. So you'd already
Yes.
mentioned one,
Yes.
that I actually didn't get the chance to watch. That was near
I've not seen that
Halloween.
one. I did see Guillermo del Toro's. I actually made it to the theater for that one. And that one was like, I don't know, just like really cool. I think like I've recently watched the original Pinocchio, and it's like, I think there's kind of like some animated kind of like things that you can kind of admire. It's like, oh wow, like Disney was doing this like in, I'm gonna butcher the date, but in the 1940s, I believe. Um, it's like kind of cool as like kind of a cultural kind of like piece. I think this one, like Guillermo's, was just like, I don't know, just like so cool in terms of like retelling the story, the stop motion, while like drizzling his Guillermo kind of like
Mhm.
spice on top of it. I thought it was like a really cool, coalition of that kind of stuff. So
Was the art is just I am continuously amazed by stop motion and try to do my best to watch as much as I can because of just how much work goes into it, like the artist put into creating like a full film. And
yeah,
it was beautiful to watch, but also just a story, around grief and relationships and fascism. Smart,
I did
it
not
is.
quite see that coming. That was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
not holding back. Not holding back.
and I wonder too, considering like everything I just named in animated films, that like it's not just about this story on the surface, that there's an underlying message, kind of the impact that has as well, as far as like parents and what they decide to show their kids or not. And I think I have no kids. I don't know if that is in my future, but I would think if it is, that I would want my kids to be able to see films like this because it does provide an introduction to frankly more complicated ideas, but ideas they should know about and things that
Yeah.
exist in the world. But I imagine there's some people that maybe don't feel the same way. And so I'm also curious about how that may or may not impact, what they decide to show their kids or not. Like that it feels maybe, I don't know, easier to like, here is Despicable Me and, a kind of a kooky super villain and
Mm-hmm.
making friends with these kids and actually kind of figuring kind of his life out and how to be a good person versus like here is a film about grief and
Yeah.
war and fascism
Yeah.
and the really painful impact of all of those things. And I don't know, it's an interesting idea to think about. I don't know how
Yeah.
much that doesn't impact people's kind of movie patronage, but it's something that I have been kind of reflecting on, is that animated
Yeah.
movies aren't just kind of about a romance or about an adventure anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, no, I'll be very interested to see because I think we have like um, a lot of good things kind of like on our slate that like that kind of will give us a good kind of idea of where things are headed next year. With we have one of the most talked about ones that kind of like that's been leading up to this next year is like the Super Mario Brothers movies, which has been
mm,
talked about for a variety of reasons. I think like at least the animation and kind of like the nudges to like the video game franchise, I think looks really good. As well as like I think maybe like one of the most anticipated movies of the next year, Into the Spider Verse.
mhm.
Well, is it it's Spider-Man. I can't remember the subtitle, but Into the Spider-Verse 2 or something like that. Return to
The
the
follow up,
Spider-Verse.
yeah, it is the follow up.
No Way Home Spider. I don't know. But yeah, that one's going to be another anticipated, really highly anticipated one. So I think Disney might end the year with a new princess movie, if I have that correct. Maybe called Wish. Maybe it's not a princess movie, but I think Disney will end the year like in that Thanksgiving slot with another movie starring a female lead, I
Mhm.
guess. So it'll be a really interesting year for animation. I think and I think this ties into kind of everything we've been talking about. Um, you know, do parents, do children, do people in general still feel like animated movies are worth going to the theater?
Mm.
Are they? Because I think despite kind of it might be in a down year, like a lot of people still find the MCU movies like worth going to the theaters. Like, oh, I'll make time for that. I'm going to get, some people are like, oh, I'm going to get dressed up and I'm going to go see Wakanda Forever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like Avatar, like despite like all the discourse around like the Avatar franchise, that is still a movie people are like, oh, that's like appointment, need to go to the theater, see it on a big screen, sort of thing. And I think it feels like at least for the past couple of years, Minions, The Rise of Gru aside. Never thought that those words would come out of my mouth, but it feels like right now, like parents and people in general kind of don't, they kind of like this thinks this is something I can wait for to be on Disney Plus. This is something I can wait to be on Netflix. Oh, it's already on. Like I'll just watch it on like maybe my big screen in the living room. We'll have like a movie night at home on a Friday. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I think so. It feels like that's where they're at now, and I think next year will let us know if this is like kind of a permanent thing happening in the film industry as a whole, um, or this may have just been a blip, and we get right
Mhm.
back to it. Like Super Mario Brothers does super well, Spider Verse does super well. The Pixar movie, the one with the fire person
Yeah,
and the
in the
water
water.
person,
Yeah,
Elements, I think it's called.
I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
Okay, sure. I love when similar to you, I don't think I connected as much to Turning Red as you did, but I loved how original it felt. I loved like that they were really going for it. Um, this one feels like the Elements feels like something a lot more simpler, a lot more safer. Um, so we'll get that too, and that'll be in the mix for us. So yeah, next year will be, I think, really telling for animation's future.
Yeah. And I think
So
you even talking about this idea of like, is it what's worth me going to the theater for is a really great segue for our
yeah,
next theme, which is
okay.
this idea of streaming and VOD versus like a theatrical experience and what people decided they wanted to go spend money on and what they decided they could wait for. Um,
Mhm.
I know I personally, and even before us starting this podcast and pressing record, we talked about kind of AMC. I have an A-list pass, so I go as much as I can to be in the theater. I appreciate just kind of the experience of watching with strangers and all of us laughing or gasping or cheering or whatever it may be at the same time together. I think there's something that is special about that. I've always felt that way about going to see movies in the theaters. I like watching movies at home. I watch a lot of movies at home. I also find myself getting more distracted easily when I am at home versus just being
Yes,
able to
absolutely.
fully invest when I'm,
Yeah.
in the theater. But that is kind of where we're at in the industry now, I think. Of course, it started in 2020 with COVID that like all the only option was to see things via streaming or VOD. Um, and that's continued. That movies are available. Ooh, movies are available earlier now on. I am thinking the one that stands out is like Bros. I saw in theater and then it was immediately on VOD like a week or two right after I saw it in theaters. I think a lot of folks were having conversations around like commercial, you know, the revenue. If films aren't successful in theaters, can we give it a second life on streaming or on VOD, which is why people are kind of pushing things out a little quicker. But I guess I'm curious about your thoughts on this. Like, what I see as a disruption to the theatric experience is like this huge rise in streaming and VOD.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's totally disruptive. I mean, we just spent like a good chunk of time speaking about like how animated movies have been like kind of like on the decline. But like, I think like once upon a time, like the Oscar-y awardsy like movie would like, wasn't like blowing box office records, but like, like the big familial drama of like the fall did like get people into seats. And I kind of live in my own little bubble here in New York City where, I will go see a 7 o'clock movie and it'll be like me and a bunch of older people who are also kind of into like, checking off their Oscars watch lists and stuff like that. But I know that's not everywhere. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, and the numbers kind of like show that, I think like something like The Fablemans, like Steven Spielberg, like there's only like so many people who are like kind of like on a last name, just their last name basis, like in Hollywood, like Spielberg, that movie is like by all accounts, like I don't know, a lot might be too strong for such like because I think we kind of like we don't have high expectations for these movies anymore, but like it feels like once upon a time, like the new Spielberg movie. It's like he's telling about his childhood. It's gonna be a big Oscar awardsy movie. Like that would have got like people like excited. And
Mhm.
now it just feels like if they are excited, because there's not enough of a kind of like it must be seen on a big screen kind of pull to it. It's like, oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I would like to know like Spielberg's take on his own childhood. I'll just wait for it to be on HBO Max because it eventually will be on HBO Max. And it feels like it just feels like all movies are now like fighting an uphill battle to get people into the theaters for them.
Mhm.
I it feels like the superhero movies, these big blockbusters, these kind of movies that I think have enough buzz around them can kind of like get there easier, but everywhere else kind of not so much. And I think another good example is a movie that I actually like really enjoyed was like Don't Worry Darling. That was a movie that I thought like had so much buzz around it, kind of like and all like harmless buzz, I want to say.
Yeah, there's some of that like old Hollywood drama behind the scenes, but not anything that's
Yes,
particularly like, super harmful in the way that some previous trauma has. But it's just like things that are petty, like that
yeah,
buzzy celebrities, big celebrities type of feel.
exactly. So like I gathered like me and my friends and like like we like had like where I was like think there was like five of us like sat next we were like all familiar with like the drama and like just sat back and had like a really good time watching that movie. And I thought more people would like kind of feel similar to like kind of want to have that experience. And like, I think that movie did okay, but I guess like even that wasn't enough to get like, muster enough people to be like, all right, let's make this like a real box office success.
Yeah.
The way I feel like it might have been prior to streaming and kind of like prior to like this era where you're just kind of like, do I really want to see that movie? Maybe I'll just catch it one day when it's on something. It
Hmm.
feels like a lot of people's mindsets these days.
And what's so
What were your thoughts?
fascinating? Yeah, I would agree that there are films that are coming out now that maybe 20 years ago would have at least, maybe made 100.
Yeah.
Like it would have made something, whether it's like rom-coms of the past. I'm thinking of like Ticket to Paradise came out in theaters. I saw it in theaters and immediately was on VOD. Of I think Don't Worry Darling, that typical like that. I love the gossip. I followed the
Mm-hmm.
gossip. That probably got me in the theater along with Florence Pugh. Um, and people didn't follow that kind of same veil. I think something like The Woman King, which I think did okay.
Yeah.
But that's like a
Yeah. It looks like
historical
Don't Worry
action
Darling's like
epic.
at
Yeah.
86 million worldwide and The Woman King, which I think like had a like a steady run, you know what I mean? It wasn't like made all its money and then like fell off hard. It
Mhm.
was just doing steady throughout. It's like at 90, it's like 92. So yeah,
Yeah, and things of the past of like historical drama, action, epic type things would have made a lot more money 20 years ago.
yes.
So I think there's something to that too, of like what people find worth their time seeing in theaters. And then I think there is that piece of like, well, it will just be on streaming. And I think each of
Hmm.
those movies that we just mentioned, she's just my cat is a part of this too. Um, are now available to be watched from your couch. And I think people like that convenience. I will admit that I do also like that convenience, but try to make it a point of seeing things as they were made for the theater. But I'm curious about just is there any impact on how you enjoy a film if you're in the theater versus when you're at home?
Like completely everything you were saying earlier, I think like I totally relate to. I think I'm just so much more easily distracted at home. And I'm somebody who's like, I think I've like, relatively good TV setup, like respectful roommates and all that. And I like put my phone in the other room. I take off my Apple Watch, leave that in the other room. So I'm like usually get like some coffee, some snacks, and like try to like lose myself into the movie I'm watching. And it still doesn't come close to being in a theater. They're
Mhm.
like and if I knew exactly kind of what it is, maybe I would like sell this information to somebody. But like, there is still something magic about like, yeah, as you're saying, like being in the theater, like watching it even amongst strangers, and kind of like receiving something all together that I think like, in my opinion, I am the person who goes sees like Don't Worry Darling with their friends. I am the person that goes to the movies to watch The Fablemans. Like, I think like no matter what the genre is, we haven't spoken about Nope yet, and I can I can like, speak towards, okay, you really have to see Nope on
In
like the
theaters.
biggest screen possible you can. Um, but like I think there is like something to, if you're in a position where you can, like, I'm also an A-lister, and where it's just like, well, I'm paying the money anyway, so I'm gonna make use of it. That I don't know. I think like every filmmaker is kind of like making these movies with like the big screen in mind. You know what I mean? And so I think there is something to see, my honest opinion, as much as you can, like in the theaters. And honestly, I think like supporting what you like enjoy is like important too, because this is like, as much as like, we're moved by these things and like have our heartstrings tugged at and like get excited, like, Hollywood Hollywood is an industry, they are a big business, you know what I mean? There are a lot of these, kind of decisions about what gets put us on screen, like how much things are marketed are motivated by like kind of like money. And I think, as individuals, we have like, just like to play a small role in like kind of like, supporting the filmmakers. We want to see continue growing, such as like Jordan Peele. And we maybe speak about this a little later. Babylon is quite the movie. It is quite the movie, and I think I'm pretty positive on it. A couple thoughts running through my head. One, I think it's worth seeing in theaters. Damien Chazelle does some like big bombastic stuff in that movie that is worth seeing in the theaters. But not only that, I think Chazelle is proving himself to be like one of the most interesting young filmmakers. I think kind of like going right now. He might be in his 40s, but like he's still, very young in like the grand scheme of things. I think this is like his fourth feature film, with like Whiplash, La La Land, First Man, and Babylon being his fourth one. That I'm so interested to see where he goes and like his career, that I kind of want to just tell people, hey, go support that movie, like help it out. Just so, Hollywood continues like kind of funding this man's project, because what's in his head is like really interesting and intriguing. So yeah.
And that's certainly something I've been thinking about is, I recognize that we are consumers. Ultimately, our money does contribute to something. And it means something to Hollywood when things do make a certain amount of money back. I know, I think something, especially when it comes to like smaller films, particularly films that are created by, written by, directed by people of color, women, where they don't get as much support. My worry is, will we see more of that? Will we see more opportunities? And then even exciting young filmmakers, whether or not they'll continue to have some of that support and get to make the next film, depending on whether it's supported by folks who come out to the theaters. And I know streaming matters in some way. I imagine they get some kind of feedback or something on the back end that I don't understand.
You got to think, right? There has to be some numbers you're looking at.
Yeah.
I think,
but it's certainly a worry to me, at least. And like, there's some films I've really enjoyed over the years that I'd love to see those people have another opportunity to continue to make films, and box office matters as part of that.
Yes.
I wish it didn't. Yeah, I wish there were other factors that were at play that people could receive some of that support, but ultimately that's just not how it works. But yeah, I think as far as my own enjoyment, I'm similar to you. I do prefer seeing things in theaters, and my experience in the last year has been really interesting because I've moved from like a major city to a much smaller like college town, at least for the year. So I've seen a lot of movies alone. Like I've been
Mm,
in the theater, but it's just
yeah.
been me. Um,
Yeah.
and I recognize like watching Bones and All in the middle of like a not quite rural, but smaller, like Illinois City. I'm not in Chicago.
Hmm.
That likely would be the case. Um, but that's been something too I've been thinking about is like the part that I love about going to the theater is to share it with other people. Like I remember one of my favorite movie going experiences was going to see Girls Trip, and the entire theater was just like women,
Yeah.
specifically
Nice.
just like Black women, all of us
Yes.
in there experiencing this together. There is a scene that like a taser is mentioned in the dialogue. There was a woman in the theater who pulled out her own taser and like clicked it.
No.
So like all of us are cracking up and just like, and there's something just about that, like where we all know, like she pulled it out, we knew what it was, we knew what it
Yeah.
was in, reference to in the movie, and you just feel that together.
Hmm.
And it, and I imagine COVID has a big impact on this because I can't recall the last time I was actually in a really packed theater. Maybe Spider-Man No Way Home last year was probably the
Hmm.
most packed theater I've been in. This year, maybe Top Gun.
Yeah.
Um, but I have had a lot of like very like, oh, it's just me. And maybe it's like I'm also going at like a different time that other people, maybe if I go later in the day, they're to, but that's something I've been missing too. Is like I enjoy going to the theater. I will continue to do so, but I have missed like people being with me.
Yeah.
And
No, that's funny you say that. As Oscar people, I don't even know what you'd call like people who like try to like, catch up on like the best picture front runners. So, but like, when I was like living in Tampa for a bit, there was like plenty of times when it was like movies, I was like, oh, it's only playing in this one theater, like way out here. Well, like I gotta go see it because it's like up for best picture. And yeah, like plenty of movies like all by myself. Just like strolling in there. Maybe there'd be like one other like, older gentleman like sitting in like the front row. And be like, all right, we're gonna do this. And despite that kind of like weird, kind of like, am I the oddball kind of feeling, like I still choose that over watching it at home every time, um so anyways, I'm gonna go for a segue here. What did you feel was your favorite theatrical experience in this year?
this year. Oh, it's between two. It's either Top Gun or Everything Everywhere.
Hmm.
Um, there were more people in the theater for Top Gun Maverick, so there was more of like a reaction of all of us together, whether it was like a oh or ah or oh, like just the the excitement for most of the movie because there were so many really wonderful like practical effects that we're all just watching together and people that were cheering on and characters that we were invested in that like you could just feel the entire theater leading into that moment. So that was great. I think Everything Everywhere, because it seems like all of us just walked in not knowing what we were expecting because based off of the reactions that I had and the people around me had, it was fun just to be kind of invested in that way as well. So I think those were probably my top two of the year in terms of like theatrical experiences. What about you?
Great question. I think this one's like pretty easy for me. I think it's hands down Nope. I think I saw it twice over the span of like maybe 2 days. It was either like 2 or 3 days. Um, I was like, and I'm not to spoil anything as we like eventually reveal like our top five of the year. But that movie, and I spoke a lot about it to plug the Nope episode. My own thoughts, as well as like the other members of the Yonka table who were on that episode. Um, but it just felt like Jordan Peele like coming into like the peak of his powers, like in my humble opinion. And seeing it like on the big screen was just like gave it like this like extra element that like I don't think you can capture on like a smaller screen. You know, it's just like the like having to turn your head to catch like or like seeing in the corner of your eye like the ship like quickly zoom through the clouds was like so cool and so unique and so only can be done in this medium on the big screen was kind of magical. And then, you know, and not to spoil another segment, but when they finally capture the what is called in the movie the Oprah shot, when like the alien spoilers for Nope.
we're likely gonna be spoiling a lot of movies.
Okay. You know, so yeah, potential spoilers ahead. When they capture the Oprah shot, which is like kind of like if they've been like kind of going for the entire movie, seeing the ship in that position on screen was, I don't know, just like transcendent, out of body, just like totally beautiful. And like, you know, I think when you like you mentioned earlier that feeling after a movie where you're just like, yo, that was a movie. That's like that's how I left Nope, where I was just like, yo, that's a movie. I don't know. I think that was like close to like Love and Thunder, or you know, and like
Yeah,
that
it
kind
came
of
out
like
in July. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like, you know, the summer, which we may speak about, like how it was like a bit of a slow summer. I think it really hit me watching Nope, where I was like, this is why we go to the movies. Like this is what we need to be supporting. So yeah, definitely Nope. And I hate to do it. I don't even know if there's a close two. It's like it's kind of Nope for me, and then there's a gap, and then I think I'd really have to think about like who would come next. So
Nope was like I did really like it. I had to sit with me for me to be like, oh yeah, okay. I know what was going on here. It actually was one of my favorites of the year. I think I left the theater like I think I need to marinate. So that's probably why I didn't have a similar like reaction right after of like, yeah, that was it was like maybe a few days later where I was like, maybe I should go see that again. I think
out of all the movies, I think
yeah.
that's like a total fair reaction, especially when you have like the movie being like intercut with this like monkey going crazy storyline that like for some reason I was like so in tune with what everything Peele was doing in that movie that like I kind of really accepted everything. But like, you know, I could totally understand somebody being like, what was going on with this part? And I'd be like, I don't know if I can explain it, but I was with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I do
No,
get that.
it definitely was one of my tops. We'll talk about kind of what is within our top five. But it was one that had to like work its way there after sitting with it a little bit. And actually, I think as far as just wrapping up some of our themes, Nope and Top Gun, which both of us have talked about a little bit, kind of capture some of the rest of the themes that I had thought of in terms of like you already mentioned there being a release this summer. Top Gun came out May 27th. Nope came out at the end of July. There wasn't too much that was notable in between that. So kind of interesting considering historically blockbusters and bigger films are coming out during the summer and didn't quite happen this time around, which is curious. I think people just continue just to go and see Top Gun as a result. It did make quite a lot domestically, worldwide. Right now, it is the most the highest grossing of 2022. I think Avatar tried.
I think I think they're running out of days, but
Yeah,
yeah.
2 days left of the year.
Yeah.
But then also something to be mindful of too is just like the amount of directors that we got back and in action. You already mentioned Spielberg, already mentioned Peele, Rami, some other folks that I imagine we will get to. Chazelle, you've already mentioned, as we start to maybe talk about some of these other films and more specific categories that have been created. But just James Cameron, of course, Avatar 2. We do have a podcast episode on that.
Yeah.
We also have a podcast episode on Nope. and Wakanda Forever. So Ryan Coogler's back. But other folks who big directors, but tend to make maybe smaller films. So Park Chan Wook made Decision to Leave, which is likely South Korea's. They will be nominated probably for Best International Feature.
Yeah, yeah,
likely.
absolutely. I would think
Yeah.
so.
And for those who are maybe unfamiliar with his work, Old Boy is maybe his most known film. But Noah Baumbach released White Noise today on Netflix, I believe. So
Yes.
we are recording on the 30th, and White Noise
Yeah.
was released. Luca Guadagnino in Bones and All, and then of course we've already mentioned The Woman King. So just want to mention just a slow
Yeah, it was
summer, but
slow summer.
directors.
Like lots of directors who are like out here, like, you know, it's like funny. I mean, I want to say for the most part, I mean, you could make the argument that Gina Prince Bythewood and in my kind of opinion, Jordan Peele, but a lot of people might push back on this. I think they were kind of like, I think they were putting some of their best work forward, in my kind of opinion.
I would agree.
You know, I think some of these other ones, you know, it feels like, you know, maybe just like another movie on their catalog rather than maybe like, you know, quite possibly like their masterworks, you know, like stuff like that. So, but it was nice to like kind of get all of them. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it was nice to get like this nice eclectic group of like big name directors. And I would, you know, a couple were operating, I think, like at the peak of their powers. The other ones, I was just happy to have you here. Damien Chazelle, not everything in that movie worked for me, but I was happy to have you here. I'm glad you're at the party.
Okay. Well,
Ryan Coogler,
yeah, maybe not my favorite from him, but
not my favorite
also
from him.
I'm always happy to. There's some things that Wakanda Forever that did work for me. We had the episode on that where I talked about some more of the emotionally resonant scenes, and I really loved that women were central to the story, which is not in the same way to other blockbusters that we've seen this year. I think
Yes.
Avatar 2, a lot of the women took a step back in terms of their presence within that film. So I did appreciate that, but there are other parts that I think you mentioned earlier, it felt like different things were happening at the same time that just didn't mesh together. So,
Yeah.
but I'm always happy to see him directing as well. So, well, what we will, I guess, shift to is just our favorites and our disappointments.
Okay.
I have a couple categories here of different things as far as like our favorite releases and performances, scenes, and then where we'll end or just talking about films that we really enjoyed this year. I think we've started some of that conversation as far as our favorite theatrical experience, but because streaming is such a big part of our lives now, I'm curious about what your favorite streaming release. It was only on streaming and only available via a streaming service, what you really enjoyed.
Okay, good question. I think I was looking through my Letterboxd. Shout out to Letterboxd. I don't know if we can get them as a sponsor or anything, but we've given them multiple shout outs today. I was looking through it, and it's like, you know, as we've mentioned, like I think we're both big theater goers. So I honestly don't think I've seen a lot that were only streaming. I think my favorite though was Chip and Dale, just Rescue Rangers, the movie. I think, is that the title? Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers? Yeah, just Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. I thought just some of the jokes in that were just so clever and just so funny that I believe it's John Mulaney and it's the other guy from SNL, I believe. Slowly pulling Andy Samberg.
I did watch it, I promise. And I did like it.
Andy Samberg and John Mulaney. I think there were also like the writers behind it as well. And so I was just like, Man, I wish we lived in the world, because it feels like we kind of been speaking, and I know I'm jumping topics here, but we were kind of speaking about like kind of animated movies in the last couple of years have like kind of like not done so well, and kind of hinted at like, once upon a time, like, comedies were like really big, kind of like bring people to the movies, box office, like kind of like gold mines for a lot of people. And watching that movie and like hearing those jokes and just like hearing the performances, it made me just be like, man, I'm really sad that we never got like a run of Andy Samberg and John Mulaney movies in which they were like, the Eddie Murphy, the Will Ferrell, the Adam Sandler of like a time, you know what I mean? Like just like, 6 to 7 movies in which they just like pumped out some comedies, some hit, some failed. Cause like they're both, I think they're both so funny. I saw John Mulaney live not too long ago, and hilarious individual in my opinion. And yeah, I don't know, Rescue Rangers, I thought like, all the Rescue Rangers of ness of it aside, I thought just like them two, their comedy, their jokes like really was really funny and made me long for I don't know, a different another multiverse in which they were big comedic movie stars, on par with like Adam Sandler in the 90s, sort of thing. How about your favorites that were only streaming?
Fresh. So that is available
Fresh.
via Hulu. It is like we already said we'd be spoiling. I'm not going to say too much, but it is a like cannibal comedy. It's like a black comedy. There's maybe some satirical elements to it, but it was released via Hulu, directed by Mimi Cave. I believe this is her first feature film. Could maybe be wrong about that. But it stars Sebastian Stan, of course, of Marvel fame, but he's been in a couple other things too, as well as Daisy Edgar Jones from another Hulu series, but which is Normal People, I believe, is what she's known from, and she's popped up a couple times in some other things as well. It was just fresh, which is
Okay.
in
Well done.
yeah, in the title there. But what's interesting, there have been a few films this year where the title card has dropped a little later in the film. You've already mentioned RRR. I think Babylon is the same way. I haven't seen it, but that's what I've heard.
Babylon does hold it.
Yeah.
Not nearly to the way RRR does. Babylon takes its time with this title card.
Fresh's title drop is really wonderful because the film starts off very differently than how it ultimately ends. And not to give too much away because I think it's better to be seen, but the beginning feels like a rom-com in a sense. Okay. And then things go sideways, then you get the title card drop, and then the film turns into like this thriller horror like feel. And it is, again, there is cannibalism, so if that's an ick or something that is uncomfortable for folks, don't spend your time watching it. But if it's something you feel like it's not anything that is like overindulgent or like gory, but there are pieces to that are at least horrifying, and it is a commentary on just like dating, what it's like to be a woman in her 20s just trying to find like romantic connection with people, and how difficult that can be. And this is obviously the extreme of what can happen, but it was just really, I think there are flaws. It's not a perfect film, but it's one that's really enjoyable, and one that felt very unique and took an idea and kind of spent it in terms of that romantic comedy element that you see at the start, and also just elements of like thrill and horror. I think all the actors did a really wonderful job, and it was just one that I finished it. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. Not bad.
No, I think I've not seen that one, and I think you sold me on it. I think I will definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I've been trying to be purposeful about watching films directed by women. So that was one that I really enjoyed this year. That was. So
Nice.
can be found on Hulu. Anything that was released via streaming that you wished was released in theaters?
Um, I saw Disenchanted with my brother and
Oh,
sister. To another Disney Plus, but uh recently, I think the Thanksgiving holiday. Um, and we were not impressed. We were very underwhelmed by that movie. And I wonder, I do wonder if it would have hit more if we had seen it in theaters.
mm,
It just felt like I think there is something about like when these streaming companies just like shove it onto the streaming platform. It feels like it's like, you know, not as big to them, so it doesn't feel as big to you in the
mhm.
audience because there might have been some. I think there were some other things like it might have just been like not that great of a movie, and I might have felt like exactly the same if I had saw in theaters. But I do wonder if like I'd seen like that movie in theaters with like my brother and sister in a crowd, if I would have connected with it more. The other one, I think, like, which isn't exactly fair because I know it did have like a theatrical run, or you could have found it in theaters, but we've already mentioned it. Like, I think RRR was a movie like I had heard about, was on Netflix, and I was just like, all right, let me just check it out. Like, was blown away, loved it, thought it was fantastic. And then I think I heard like, oh, you could actually catch it in theaters, and I was like, oh well, I would have loved to have seen this in theaters if I'd known. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that is one where I was like, ah, that was like, but it was weird because I was like, only after seeing it and experiencing it at home was I like, I should have totally gone and watched this in theaters, but I wouldn't have known. So I don't know. So I think those two. How about yourself? Which ones? Was there one that you were just like, this should have got the big screen experience?
Prey, also found on Hulu.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, that's a great answer.
Like
Weird that that didn't. And also shout out to Hulu. I think it's like kind of a slept on streaming platform.
it is. They've had a lot of really good releases. I think partially because of so a lot of, is it Fox Searchlight Pictures? A lot of their films unfortunately have gotten shafted to Hulu.
Oh, yeah.
Um and so anything that, of course, we know Disney owns Hulu and Disney Plus, and so anything that is maybe not deemed appropriate for Disney Plus ultimately ends up on Hulu. But Prey was good. I think of the sequels that we have gotten related to this, Predator franchise. This is up there. It's a really solid film. I liked the kind of the. It's a period piece that we're centered on, indigenous folks, of Americas, and specifically one particular character. And I'll actually speak about at least the actress Amber Midthunder a little bit later in one of our categories, who gave a really
Nice.
great performance. And the action set pieces were really fun. I think just the slow reveal of what exactly is going on within the story, but then the parallel stories of like this predator figure and also the main character were just really, it's a solid action movie. And while I enjoyed watching it from home because it's a good movie, I wish it would have been released in theaters. I think because there's so much that would have been really fun to just see on a big screen.
Yeah, I couldn't
Um,
agree more. Definitely have
and
the
the
framework that you could just see it succeeding on the big screen.
Yeah, yeah. So that was one I was like, "Oh, I wish it was released in theaters." I think it's, I recognize I don't have a great TV, and so I know that probably hindered even more enjoyment of the film and many other things I probably have watched here rather than in theaters. But it was only released on Hulu, so I guess those are my two Hulu picks as far as fresh
Yeah, no. Shout out to Hulu.
prey. Yeah, well, I had good films. So. We'll switch over to performances, some of our favorite performances of the year, maybe some disappointing performances. We have four different categories here. We'll start with our favorite lead performances if you have multiples. I know I do. I have 4
Yeah.
performances I really liked as far as leads are concerned. Do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
I'm wondering if there's going to be any overlap. I think there might be.
There might be.
I think there's only one place to start when it comes to lead performance this year.
Mhm.
And it is, here we go, Cate Blanchett.
In Tar,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you just want to like talk about a movie in which, like, I mean, everything kind of like revolves around somebody's performance, like, and not only do they kind of like need to do like a good job or the whole movie falls apart, like what she's asked to do in that movie is to like, I I I don't even I don't even know what how to describe it. It's like, it's she's asked to kind of like, in my opinion, like do, like a perfect routine and like gymnastics, it's like kind of like this like, oh, I don't think anybody else could have, like, I think is what I'm trying to say. It feels like that is a one-in-one performance that like so many other actresses, actors, anybody like would have like crumbled. And I think that like movie completely falls apart unless she's giving like
110%.
110%, just like this master class of a performance. And because it's just like so good, and so many of the shots are like just like so long. The scene when she's like talking to the classroom, I think that's like all one shot, just like
It's one
no
shot, yeah.
cuts, no cuts, like here we go. And it's truly incredible. And it's like, I saw that was another movie I saw with like a couple friends, and like I think we all had like different reactions to kind of like the themes of that movie and what it might have been trying to say, about like abuse and kind of like celebrities using like power, and things along those lines. But like there's no denying that Cate is in a league of her own. And I don't know. I just think about that, and it's like it felt like watching like, a basketball player just like not miss any shots and just be like completely dominant and like a game with like a game winning shot at the end. It was like, I don't know, in terms of like performances, that's like one of the ones where I've like been the most blown away by, I think, in a long time. And Cate's been on her A game for, I mean, pretty much her whole career, but like I feel like recently she's like had a bit of a resurgence, that it's just like that's kind of been culminated in this kind of movie. So, how about you?
She is listed as #1 on my list here.
She's
Uh,
good.
this is likely Oscar 3 unless Michelle Yao from Everything Everywhere upsets that. She
Also
is
on
on
my
my
list.
list,
Yeah,
also on my
yeah,
list as
yeah,
well, but this is highly Oscar #3 for Cate Blanchett. This felt like, I think the equivalent that I can describe, this felt like giving her like a Daniel Day-Lewis opportunity, like where
yes,
it's a character study of someone who is highly unlikable and complicated and powerful, and not only station but in performance and how they sit and how they take up, like it feels like she sucks the air from the room because it's only her that exists,
yeah,
like.
absolutely.
And I think a testament to the folks who acted opposite of her. I think the actress who played her wife was a really nice performance that I don't think is getting enough credit. Um, as far as being someone who's almost like a bit of a foil, who's a bit more compassionate, a bit more that feels softer compared to the exterior of this particular character. But yeah, it's her movie. It's hers. Like,
Yeah.
and I think what's so special is we've typically seen men get the opportunity to drive a character driven, like character
Yeah,
study type story.
I think I kind of, I don't know if this is like a phrase that's like actually used in any circles, but I think they're like great man movies, movies about like these great men, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And it's like
Uh-huh.
get like a big time actor to like play these great men and then like kind of get all their facets. And yeah, there's like a great woman movie, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like great, kind of like used
Yeah, you
loosely
put
here.
quotation, yeah, you put quotations around that.
you know.
And I think
So
that's what's interesting, and we'll talk, I imagine, spoiler alert, we'll talk about Tar a little bit more because
mhm.
it is one of my top of the year. But Kate, she makes it happen though. Similar to what you said earlier. If it was somebody else, I don't know if I would have felt the same way. 'Cause she just completely dominates, and it's a spectacle to watch. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, we've both already mentioned Michelle, so I bet
Yeah, we can talk about Michelle.
we can just talk about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me, I know she's had like a long, illustrious career. A bit of a revelation for me. I'm trying to think if there's like another movie in her catalog that I was like super familiar with going into this, and I don't believe so. I don't think I had seen um Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I don't think I think I like happened to miss Crazy Rich Asians, despite that being like a big box office movie that year. Um, so I haven't seen Shang-Chi. That's another Marvel movie I haven't seen. So for me, I was like kind of like taken aback, because like I think like her as the mom is like, you know, outstanding in itself, like as the original mom character, like outstanding is in itself. But like kind of like the way they use the multiverse to like kind of like bring out different performances and kind of like seeing them all kind of like be shades of the same person. I think that's where it really like elevated itself beyond kind of like maybe like even like Michelle Williams' performances in The Fablemans. I think that's where it kind of was like, oh, she's like doing so much and like showcasing so much of her talent, like all in this kind of like, all in this one movie, but also in like this like same person. And I just thought, I don't know, I just thought like that element was like super cool. And just like a super cool way to kind of use this like, you know, um, bit of a different movie kind of framework to kind of like really like showcase your stuff, if I should, yeah. I know she's had a long career. To me, like, like a stunning kind of like person to kind of discover this year.
Hmm. I all the movies that you mentioned I had seen.
Yeah.
Kind of a nostalgic type of story. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was one of the first international features I'd ever seen. Because my dad we still had VHSs in existence. And then
Mm,
it was a two tape like copy of like you would watch
nice.
one tape and the other tape. And so it was like a
That
little,
is a class. That is a
yeah,
throwback. That
yeah,
is
it
you
was a
had to
little,
be there.
so it was a little box set. And I remember watching and I was like, this is amazing. So
Yeah.
she has kind of been in my world in some way. I probably, should watch some of her other films beyond the ones that we've mentioned here. But yeah, I recall her very, very clearly kind of within that film. And I think she'd just recently been part of like a roundtable discussion with other actresses, that comes out every year around award season. And she talked about that this was the first time that she felt like she got an opportunity to show all that she can be as an actress, that she is very physical, that there is that component to her, that she can be this really wonderful action star, that she's been in a James Bond movie, like she's done the work as far
Yeah.
as being within a variety of genres, but some of them have been very like either typecast or one note. And so this gave her the opportunity to be more than just kind of this action star or this, beautiful woman, or even, I think as women grow older within Hollywood, there is this expectation, okay, you play a mother. And this felt like, yes, but also, to your point a little earlier, of like because of that multiverse element, we got more beyond that, of all that she can be and what she can display in terms of being an actress and her talent. And so this felt like a very, I think if we're kind of thinking about Cate Blanchett, we're thinking about Michelle Yeoh, that these are the things that I enjoy the about movies and about acting,
Yeah.
is that we can get this like total investment, like powerful performance from like Cate Blanchett, or we can get variety
Hmm.
of whether it's being funny or romantic or tragic, all at the same time from Michelle Yeoh. And so that's why they stood out as two performances that I really enjoyed this year.
Yeah, and I think I think as we like, kind of like the point of this episode is talk about like the film industry as a whole, but I think also to kind of get like people excited, well, the way I think we are for like, which should be like, which I don't know, I always find like the Oscars fun. I think the best picture race is like really kind of like shaky right now about like who's like kind of like who the real contenders are.
Mhm.
And so because that's like shaky, it's hard to kind of like get really invested in a race. I think like this best actress race, like right here, between Kate and Michelle, like I think like this should be like compelling all the way to the end. You know what I mean? Where
Mhm.
I don't think I'd be disappointed either way. I think they're
I
both like
wouldn't.
fantastic. And I think both like really deserving. And I know you said Kate has two, not surprising. I'm guessing this would be Michelle's first.
Mhm.
And so that then you have like that element too, where it's like Kate's absolutely worthy of three, and like this movie very well could give her third one for, and it's like Michelle's never had one. I don't know. I think like this out of the races so far, and I'm not like deep into kind of like the different races that are like kind of like popping up yet. But kind of like stepping back, big picture type stuff. Um, this one, like the best actress race, should be like really compelling this upcoming Oscar season.
Mhm. No, I agree. I agree. I think in terms of before I switch over to kind of best actor, at least my favorite, like male lead performance, another actress I will mention, I really loved Kiki Palmer in Nope. Uh,
Yeah, she's great. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
she's been
Really big
around,
year for Kiki.
yeah,
Really big year for Kiki.
and she's always been really talented. She's been working since she was a kid and has always been really kind of part of my life in a way, kind of growing
Yeah.
up alongside her and watching a lot of her films. What I've always been a little disappointed by was like how could we support her into getting something that ultimately is like Nope? And now she got it this year because she's so charismatic. She's hilarious, but she can also like be very like emotionally like she can give you that um
Mm-hmm.
and bring some of that out and you can connect in that way to her where it's not just about the comedy elements. Um yeah, she's great. And
She's yeah.
and
She's fantastic.
I'm just glad to have seen her in a part that felt like it utilized her in a good way. So
Yeah. No. Just to bounce off of that, like loved Kiki. But I also really loved like her relationship with Daniel Kaluuya's character. Because they also it's a lot reserved and it's a lot of like kind of like internal stuff Daniel Kaluuya is doing in that movie. And I think one allows like Kiki to shine, kind of like shine and be like the more vibrant person. Um, but I don't know. I think like there's something about Daniel Kaluuya's performance in that one that I was just really struck by. I was just like, I I think he's one of the best male actors going. I think
agreed.
he's like up there with like the Bradley Coopers of the world, like the Christian Bales of the world. Like I think he's like that. I think he's in that A tier now. I think maybe like it was like debatable if he was like kind of B trying to climb into the A. I think like with his like just like recent run of like starting with I mean, you could go back as far as like Get Out, but I think like what really like kind of like elevated him for me was his turn as Fred Hampton in the
Judas and the Black.
movie.
Yeah, Judas and Black
Yeah,
Messiah.
Judas and the Black Messiah. That might have taken me a second, so I appreciate that. Where I was like, whoof, this man, when he wants to be electric and he wants to like command a crowd and he wants to like just go in, he could do it. And then like see Nope, where it's like so much more reserved, so much more like kind of like, yeah, like keeping things close to the chest. I think I don't think he can do it all. And so yeah, I also like to shout at him. I don't think he's gonna be up there. I don't think it was quite like an Oscar-y performance, but in terms of kind of one I really did appreciate and kind of like cemented in my mind somebody who's like one of the best people going. That was definitely one of them. So
Mm-hmm.
both of them, fantastic.
My favorite male performance was Colin Farrell in The Banshees of Inisherin.
That is still on my
He's
list, to be honest. Do you want to speak towards that? It's still on my like checklist.
Yeah, similar to actually what I just said about Kiki, this idea of like there is talent there, and clearly this person has it. Like, how can we harness it in the best way? And I feel like Nope did that for Kiki. I think her having the opportunity, I think she has a podcast now, and she's on SNL, and so getting all these
Yes.
opportunities to really show like she's it. Like she's what we've been wanting to see more
Yes.
of. Colin has made a string of movies that I feel very like, yeah, this is what you should be doing. This is absolutely you and what you're able to kind of portray to the world. I think for a while there, because he's like very attractive, he's just conventionally good looking, that there was this like, let's shaft him into like these action films, or like he's this leading man of sorts. And frankly, I find him most compelling when like his leading performances are kind of like, whether they're complex, they're like almost pathetic is not the right word, but that's what's coming up
Mm-hmm.
to me, where it's like this person isn't like, you know, a superstar.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
specifically in this film, he's like called dull. Like
Dull.
and he dull, yes.
Okay.
That he's considered to be like boring. And
Mm-hmm.
because he's just he's a kind farmer living on an island, off the coast of Ireland,
Yeah.
and so there's not like he's not this like big superstar guy. And I find him so enjoyable in roles like that. Um, and particularly in this one, he's just like watching his like progression from this like dull but kind farmer to almost being kind of calculating and malicious a little bit, and trying to rekindle this relationship with his former best friend was just really it was really fun to watch for me. I found it really compelling. I felt really sympathetic towards him of like, yeah, it does stink when your friends don't want to be friends with you anymore and you don't really know why. And it's is it maybe about a character like you as a person, but like that's just who you are, and so you don't really know how to change that. Like there's so much to that. I was like, yeah, yeah, Colin, this is what I want from you. This is
Yeah.
these are the performances I like to see. And um yeah, I really I haven't seen it. I think the three front runners, I'll put quotes around that, for best actor feel like Colin, feel like maybe Brendan Fraser for The
Mm-hmm.
Whale, or a lot of people are talking about Elvis and Austin Butler.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And so I haven't seen The Whale. I have seen Elvis. And then, of course, I've seen Banshees. And I really like Colin's performance. I think it gives us a little something different than it's such a. What's funny now that I'm actually thinking about this, it feels like Kate Blanchett would have typically been a best actor type performance, and Colin's
Mm,
performance feels like a best actress type performance, and they've now switched,
I like that.
where
That's
there's
good
this
stuff.
like, yeah, and I find that really, really fascinating and enjoyable. So,
Yeah, no, I mean you've piqued my interest. I'm now like, you know what's funny is like I'm like I've Banshees has like been in the ether, kind of just like in the kind of like I guess like the film ether. You know what I mean? Like you go to enough movies, you like hang around these circles enough, like Banshees just kind of like floats around. And I just realized I have had no idea what the plot of this movie was. I knew it was about like friendships. I've
mhm.
heard people like offhandedly be like, "Oh, this is like me and you" and stuff like that, like on podcasts and things. But like I had no idea it was about like kind of like a farmer and kind of like rekindling an old friendship. Like, so I don't know. Now that I'm like, oh, no wonder I haven't gotten around to it. Nobody's spoken to me about what it actually might be about. So I'm now
Yeah,
more to catch that one. So
I'll speak more to it a little later.
okay, fair.
Any other
Nice
lead performance?
tease.
Any
Nice
other
tease.
lead performances that you really enjoyed that we haven't mentioned?
No, I think those are I think those I think that like I think those are good. we can transition to supporting here, and I guess
Mhm.
we'll just start. Um, I'll start with, and this is you. Have you seen Glass Onion yet?
I have.
Okay,
I have.
good. I was gonna mention. I'm just gonna just start with Janelle Monáe.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I'm gonna try to talk around this. Spoilers for Glass Onion. I think it came out Christmas Day or something like that. Like, okay. So it's been out for like a week now, but like, so I'll just still give people the opportunity to kind of catch it for themselves. Wow. I actually don't know how to not spoil this as soon as I said that. Janelle Monáe. It's just gonna sound so like surface level. She's asked to do a lot in that movie, and she does a really good job. That's all I can say without spoil. No, all right. Spoilers for Glass Onion. Skip 30 seconds. Hit the 30-second button like 4 times. Janelle Monáe is like kind of a twin in this movie, and that's kind of like where like everything kind of rests. The entire movie rests on that kind of revelation, is that the person who is at the island is not the person people think she is. She's actually the twin of somebody who's recently died. And then the second half of the movie, a lot of it is spent kind of like understanding who the original character was, and kind of like seeing the journey of like who the character on the island is. And Janelle does such a great job of like really making me believe that like she is two different people in this movie. Like there is like, I think her name's Andy, and then I'm gonna forget the other person's name.
Helen.
Um, huh? Oh, Helen, Andy
Helen.
and Helen. Yes, and just like giving them like different accents and different hairstyles, and like it's like when Helen arrives on the island, Helen in essence playing is acting as Andy, and so you're like watching this actor play somebody acting as somebody else, and you can kind of like feel it, and it was just so cool. I just thought she did like such a like fantastic job, and the movie kind of like, once again, like it's like not quite to the Tar level, but it really does like kind of rest on her shoulders, and it's like if she can't really kind of like make me believe that like there's two characters here, or if it just kind of like feels messy or icky, I think a lot of that movie just like kind of like falls apart, and you're just kind of like, all right, whatever, but like she's able to like make it work. And I think, yeah, just like able to like make it work, and kind of like just like elevate the movie to like being more than just like a fun kind of like mystery. It makes it into like a very intriguing, like, I don't know, thought provoking, like 2.5 hours or however long it was. So definitely want to shout out Janelle Monáe. So do you have one?
I did really like her performance, so I will just retweet everything you just said.
Nice.
Um, as far as Everything Everywhere, Ke Huy Quan, um,
Yes.
who's great.
Yeah.
He is my hope for supporting actor. I think he has racked up maybe the most awards thus far.
He seems
And
like the biggest lock.
mhm.
Knock on wood. He probably doesn't want to hear that right now. But he does seem like the biggest lock for his award, I
Yeah,
think.
I will say, the person I feel is a challenge maybe to that is Barry Keoghan from Banshees of Inisherin, who I
Mhm.
also really enjoyed. And I'm just going to run through a few folks only because I'm going to speak to them in some of my favorite scenes. So I figured it'd just be more helpful to expand there. But yeah, so Everything Everywhere, I've already mentioned. Barry Keoghan and Carrie Condon are both supporting performances from Banshees. So Barry's character is like this village kind of menace where he's kind of creepy and um but is also he's really it's sad tragic kind of story that is behind his particular character, and he tries to make friends with Colin Farrell's character, and it's yeah. I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe some of that. And then Carrie's character is the sister of Colin's character. Also just gives a really, really great performance. So both of them I really enjoyed, so wanted to shout and I'll speak to them a little bit more as far as a favorite scene from that particular film. Curious, did you have other supporting performances that you liked?
I was going to shout out Angela Bassett.
Yep.
We've I've kind of hinted at my disappointment. And Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. In part because my expectations were so high, which is in retrospect probably really unreasonable for what they were trying to do. But I was not disappointed in Angela Bassett. She was electric. You know what I mean? Like kind of like everything that like comes out of her mouth was just like kind of like, immediately like enraptured you. It's just like, I mean, like, she somehow like feels like she's not in a Marvel movie. She's like giving the performance of somebody like, and I guess like, a highbrow like drama, kind of type of movie, and yet she makes it fit so perfectly in the Black Panther universe. You know what I mean? It's like somehow she's able to like strike the notes where it's like whoa, but at the same time you're never like taken out of it. You totally believe that she is grieving T'Challa and Shuri, in like these different moments. I think it's like in just like an excellent performance, and like we was speaking towards sort of the awards chances of these individuals. Like I think there is a bit of there's a push. We can say that much. There's a push for Angela to kind of like get like this nomination. I don't believe she's ever won an Academy Award, which is wild to think about, because she's been kind of at this for so long. So I think that would be really cool for her. I think it would, more than like it would definitely be kind of like a career kind of award, like more than like this like, oh, Black Panther, like this is your best performance type thing. But I think that's great. I have no problem with like awarding people for a career for like maybe like not their, probably not even in her top 10 performance. I don't know, but Oscars has a history of doing that. So I'm, just, hey, continue with tradition. It's like you guys have set the standard that sometimes you guys step away from like maybe the best performance of the year, give it to somebody for kind of like a body of work. This could be a good year to do that. So depending on who else is nominated, like I think I'd be happy with Angela because that was definitely one of my favorites of the year.
I would agree. She was on my list as well.
Nice.
So you've already spoken to all of that. I think the last person I'll mention is Lashana Lynch from The Woman King. I found her really charismatic. She had kind of this, her role was almost to be a relief as far as comedy is concerned, and in a movie that holistically was a bit more serious. And I just found her to be, someone that every time that she was on screen, I really enjoyed seeing. I felt that way. She had her part in the most recent James Bond film. She was just Miss Honey and Matilda. So she is popping up in a lot of different ways, and I enjoy kind of seeing her whenever I do see her. So I really enjoyed her role as far as that particular character in The Woman King.
Very cool. Yeah, couldn't agree more. She's definitely feels like she's a super rising star. So it's going to be really exciting to like kind of see where her career continues to grow and like as she grows as an actress. I think that'll be cool. So is the next thing disappointing?
Yes. Was there any disappointing or underwhelming performances for you? I have one. I didn't.
I wonder if we have the same one. I don't know.
We'll find out. Mine was Tom Hanks in Elvis.
Okay, yeah. I have a different one. Okay, but you can go.
I'll keep it short. I think a lot of my problems with Elvis revolve around Tom Hanks' character. So he plays Colonel Tom. Is it Tom Parker? Something Parker? He plays Elvis's manager.
Yep.
And, sorry.
No, yeah.
But it's the movie is a biopic, but it is following kind of Elvis through his relationship with this manager, and it maybe wasn't my favorite way to go about this story about Elvis. And I have a lot of problems with the movie in other ways, as far as like some editing choices, how quickly it goes, for how long it is. But I think Austin Butler is really good as
Mm-hmm.
Elvis, and I think Tom Hanks. I love him. He is wonderful.
He's America's dad.
He is America's dad, and it just wasn't his best performance. It was a really weird performance, and not you. I find Tom Hanks can either be really charismatic or really emotionally captivating, and it was neither one of those, and
Mm-hmm.
so it just kind of fell flat for me.
Yeah. Yeah. He has to speak towards my disappointing um actress of the year. And I hate to keep piling on, but I just gave Black Panther 2 a shout out with Angela Bassett. So I'm trying to be careful here because I don't want to I thought Letitia Wright in the first Black Panther was like fantastic. You know what I mean? Like everything she was like asked to do in the first one was like perfect. She like nailed it and went above and beyond. I thought like being like the cool, funny, sidekicky sister to T'Challa. It's like she was amazing. And I think in this one she was like really asked to do so much. And that's the thing where I'm like, I can't even say like I'm all that disappointed because they put like so much on her shoulders. But I really wanted to like love that movie, and I think because so much was on her shoulders, I needed her to go above and beyond and kind of like, wow, do like be a Lydia Tarr, and that like kind of like, you know, kind of elevating kind of like what you're asked. And I think I think it might have just like been too much for her. I think it was like, and then you like tie in like kind of like the grief aspect, like, so I don't want to like shame her or anything, as like beat around the bush so much. But I was like pretty disappointed and kind of her performance, I guess, is what it comes down to. You know, I real like, I think going in, I think there's like a lot of like talk around other things like behind the scenes, like with her. And I really tried to like let all that go. Like, I tried not to bring that into the movie. I felt like creep up in my mind. I was like, not now, we can think about that later. Let's just try to sit back and enjoy it. And even like with that, I was still like, I hate to say it, when when she became Black Panther in like in like the theater I was at, it was just kind of like that moment really needs to like hit, and this could be also like be more writing direction, so it's not like completely on her. But like when she became Black Panther and like dropped down in the suit, like the whole theater should have like gone ballistic because that's what that moment calls for. And I think like two people in the back kind of like clapped twice, and it was just like kind of like just like this like dead moment. And I think that kind of like summed up a bit of her performance, but kind of like the movie as a whole, sort of, because that scene didn't hit, and I don't think like her performance hit, and I think the movie all like kind of fell flat for me. So
Uh,
yeah.
no, and I could certainly see a lot of that. I think if folks are wanting a really great Letitia performance, Small Axe is on Amazon Prime. It's a limited series that she
Yes.
shares time with John Boyega. So folks are wanting something a little different from her as far as where source material kind of aligns with the performance. I think that's something folks can check out, because I can see, I think there's so many factors going into Black Panther that wasn't in her favor, of like, felt like there was a movie that was written prior to Chadwick's death, and then there was a movie written after, and then they tried to do both, and then she was asked to do both, and I think it was a lot to hold at the same time. I think uh, more strategic direction, I think could have helped her out, frankly.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so I do understand that. Where we'll end with as far as performances go before we get to
let's get out of the disappointments.
Yes.
Get out of the disappointments.
I do want to mention just a couple folks who have like some like breakout performances. So people, I believe either this is their first feature film or maybe first like on the billing, like their name is there. So I wanted to name a couple folks because I have some scenes I'd love to talk about. So just a few folks, Everything Everywhere again, Stephanie Sue, I believe.
Yes.
Amber Midthunder from Prey, who I'd shouted out a little earlier, and then Uso Mbedu, I believe, from The Woman King. So each of these women I thought were really great in their respective movies. Either had really like powerful moments. I think all three of them did at some point. As far as some action set pieces that were really fun on each of them. Of course, for Everything Everywhere, some are a little bit more like humorous action, but regardless, it was action. But I just really enjoyed each of their performances. I hope that they continue to be, hired in different types of films. I recognize too, all three of these, they're women of color, young women as well. And so I'd love to be able to see them continue to shine because they were great in each of these.
Cool. I'll just keep mine short too. I'll shout out Diego Calva from Babylon. I thought he was like, I thought he was like really good. I was like, Margot Robbie's like electric in that movie, but I think he like, kind of is able to like match her energy like really well and like kind of like own kind of like way of going about it. He was like, he's like, he in that movie, he goes from, I'm not keeping it short, but he goes from like kind of like just like this aspiring like dreamer who's just like transporting like elephants to like different parties and stuff into like being like a bit of a movie producer, and just like you kind of get like a full range of him. And he's like, I don't know, really cool in that movie. And I love when like big directors kind of like, when you could have any leading man you want. As Damien Chazelle has like kind of like, been working with like Ryan Gosling in like the last couple movies, kind of like decided to like kind of like go in an opposite direction with like a person of color and like kind of a bit of a new person in this situation. So that was cool. I'll shout out two of the younger stars, Gabriel LaBelle and Chloe East from The Fabelmans. I think Spielberg has a history of like finding like generational talents at super young ages and kind of like just like paving the way for the rest of their careers. So I'm sure we're going to be hearing about them more in the future. They were both like fantastic. They were like they were the older teenage version of Spielberg and kind of like his first real love interest, and their kind of like awkward high school chemistry in that movie was like, I don't know, really adorable. I'll be happy to like see them continue working. And then I'll like last shout out Jaboukie Young White, who's like been really popular on Twitter for a long time, but he was the voice of I think is it Ethan in the Strange World movie.
Oh yeah, the son.
Yeah, the son. Couple Ethans this year. He was the young son in that movie, and I don't know, I've always found him like really funny, and like he just like has a great mind for comedy, and to kind of like just like see him in that role and like hear him in that role was like really cool. It was like in terms of like young kind of like normal sons actors and like that role, it was like great to see him and kind of like see the character he portrayed and kind of like see everything kind of like come together in that role. Like, and I'm happy he's doing that. I would love to see him like continue growing, because he was like working with like Dennis Quaid and the father, the in-between dad was Jake Gyllenhaal. So it was like kind of cool to see them like on the set together. Where it's like, I remember him from Twitter, so yeah, those were some, really cool performances I'm happy to see this year.
Well, we'll move to our favorite scenes. So sometimes the reason why I kind of wanted to be able to do this category is some of the ones I picked are from my favorite movies of the year. But sometimes I really like a scene in a movie that I holistically maybe didn't enjoy as much or that I
Mm,
found kind of flaws with. But I
yes.
want to give credit to that particular scene because it was great. So that's why I wanted us to spend a little bit of time being able to do some of that. I'm happy to start us off. Um,
Yeah, do you want to kick
so
it off?
yeah, my first is the dinner table monologue from Pearl. Um, so Ty West wrote and directed two films that came out this year that are connected. They are one is a film X that came out is set in the 70s. It is kind of a horror film that's in the vein of like the exploitation films from like the 70s, something similar to say like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the prequel is Pearl, which is kind of a slasher, I would probably say, that feels very similar in feel to like a Wizard of Oz. Like it's very bright Technicolor type of because it's set in like 1918, so there are pieces to that feel kind of bright and airy despite the heavier content of like there being a murderer. And I liked Pearl more than X. Mia Goth gives this like 9 minute monologue at a dinner table. I guess A24 in their dinner monologue scenes. It's another one of my favorites is from Hereditary. For those who haven't seen it, there is a monologue at a dinner table, and it's great. And this one is too. The camera is completely just focused on Mia Goth for those entire 9 minutes, and she nails it. It's great. It is like a roller coaster of just like, oh, okay, this is sad. Oh, she's kind of crazy. Like, this is not okay. Like, what are you talking? You just go through this roller coaster of emotions, and I thought she was really impressive. And I know she also, I think, took part in writing part of Pearl, so I imagine this felt a little closer to her as being part of creating some of this. And so just wanted to shout that out. That I thought that was a really, really great scene in a movie that I liked, but maybe wasn't my top of like the year, but I thought that particular scene stood out to me.
Yeah, nice. I did not make it around to seeing those movies. I had heard like a little bit of buzz of them, around them. I'm always a bit of behind on like my horror and like thriller and slasher movies. But I did see like those kind of like rising above like the rest. So I'm glad you were able to speak towards them. Um, I guess I'll start by I'm gonna try to give like another superhero movie a little love. I thought the opening scene of the Batman when it's I think it's the opening. No, no, no. The first scene actually might be with the Riddler, you know, uh killing the parents of like that kid to make it look like it's like Bruce Wayne, but it's not Bruce Wayne. But the scene in which it's like showing the city and it's like at night and it's like showing like these different criminals kind of like doing something bad, like committing a crime, and there being like some like piece of shadow like near where they're doing this crime. And you can kind of like see the fear in them and kind of be like, yo, is the Batman here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and like, they, there's a bit of like a voiceover, where you're hearing, you know, um, just kind of like, just like, the actor who plays Bruce Wayne,
Robert
kind
Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson, the little known Robert Pattinson, speak about like, just something. I think the voiceover is just like kind of just there for like a little spice. But and it just kind of like bouncing around between these different scenes. And it's just like the whole time you're kind of like you as the audience is experiencing like the fear too, where you're like, yo, I'd be kind of scared of Batman too if I was like a criminal. And when he like finally like shows up out of the shadows for like just like one of the criminals, it's almost like I think you finally understand like kind of like I think it really showcases like the power of Batman to like institute fear without even needing to be there. And that wasn't like something I've always felt about that character. I always understand like, oh, once he's there, he is a bit intimidating and scary. And like if you hear the rumors about him, like to see him show up, like can be intense. But like the idea of like inciting fear into criminals before they even commit the crime, like I felt like that opening scene really showcased that really well. So I really like that movie. So it wasn't like quite a scene from like a movie I wasn't really hot on. But yeah, that scene in particular in that movie really like stood out for me. So
I'll give some superhero love on my end too, real quick, because there's a different scene that I want to talk a lot more on. I really liked the music note fight scene from Doctor Strange.
yes,
I thought that
yes,
was really creative. It was a time in theater I can just like remember myself being, oh, this is really fun and this is cool. I didn't expect this. I think whenever I see my list of like favorite scenes, and it's either something that's kind of creative and like a spectacle of sorts, or it's something that's like really like emotional, like maybe ripped my heart out, possibly I cried type of scenes. So that's my spectrum. It's one or the other. And this
yeah,
felt like more in that burst of just like, oh, this is really cool. Like this is what I like seeing in kind of these types of movies or in like a blockbuster is just something kind of creative and fun. And that felt like it captured that. So a music note fight scene. I don't know what else to call it. So that's what,
yeah. No, that's perfect. I think that's good. That's good. Um, so I've spoken about Babylon a little bit. And so I'm just gonna like go back to it real quick. I think it's like the most recent movie I've seen. Um, there's it's not even really a scene, but it is kind of a scene. It's almost like a complete section or a chapter of the movie. But to set it up, Diego Calva's character and Margot Robbie's character are both like kind of like these big dreamers who like want to pretty much like be in pictures, Margot Robbie, and kind of like be something part of something bigger, in essence, make movies in Diego Calva's character. And so kind of like the second chapter scene of the movie is like where they both kind of like in roundabout ways end up like on this gigantic movie set where there's like it's like this big open field like in California where there's like mountains in the background and it's like big plains and it's like has a whole bunch of different like kind of like sets that are kind of like sectioned off or like a movie's being filmed here and a movie's being filmed here and out in the field is like this big epic battle taking place with a bunch of men and like armor with swords and stuff and I feels like a scene because it's just like doesn't quite leave here and it kind of like it's just like so snappy and quick and fast and everything's like it's like bouncing back and forth them showing you like what's happening over here to what's happening over here and like um and I think like I really enjoyed it for like a number of reasons. One, I think it really, you know, I wasn't there, but it feels like it's capturing kind of like what Hollywood was at that moment, like super well. And you're kind of like really getting a glimpse into it's like you're almost like kind of asking, like, wait, was it really like this? There's like plenty of comedic moments. And I'll like save the jokes as like I won't spoil the jokes, but like some of them are borderline like violent jokes to say the least and but what really makes it sing is to see kind of like both Margot's character and Diego Calva's character like kind of like not reach their dreams but kind of like get to live it out. Margot is like um acting kind of like in a scene where she's asked to do one thing and like she kind of like does it her own style and the director like really loves it and all the people behind her are really into it and kind of like she's asked to do more and it keeps like elevating and then Diego Calvas has to like get a camera because one of the cameras stops working and he goes like on this long adventure off the set to like go find it to go find like a new camera and he like happens to bring it back just in time before like so like they can get like the perfect shot with like, and I feel like I'm spoiling it, but I'm not, because it's kind of like I could say it right now, but it doesn't matter because once you see it, it's like it's even better than any way I could describe it. Um, and like he brings back just in time. They both kind of like succeed in their days, and it sounds like it's like a long like, you could probably have like a whole movie about like somebody going on an adventure and like somebody acting, but it's like really like just 15 minutes of nonstop kind of like snappy, quick shots and stuff, and it's just like so cool. And I think like it's like scenes like that where I'm like, oh man, like
Movies
I've
are
spoken
cool.
it about, yeah, where I've spoken about it multiple times where I'm like, I don't think everything in that movie comes together, but like you can just kind of see the talent and like I think in Damien Chazelle's vision and like directing ability. We're just like, all right, we have to keep letting this man work because like he's doing cool stuff. So, and I think that scene in particular really exemplified that. So,
I'll speak to two that I'll package together just because of like I mentioned earlier, some of my list is like something really cool, creative, and fun or thrilling from like an action set piece or something that felt like really emotionally like, oh, okay, you're tugging at my heartstrings. So there are two that come from different directions. So one is there's a dance scene to the song Under Pressure. Um, in After Sun between the father character and the daughter character, and it comes near towards the end of the film. And so we've had a lot of time that we've spent with these two characters. So for those who maybe don't know what After Sun is, it is kind of I like to call these films like no plot, all vibes. Where really it's just about this daughter and this father that go on vacation together, and the father character is divorced from the daughter's mother, and so they don't necessarily spend a lot of time together. And it's kind of like a reflection of the daughter 20 years later on like this particular vacation, because it's one of the last that they spent together. And so it's like this like uh the daughter character at 11 seeing through the facade of who she thinks her father is. As most of us as kids think our parents are one thing, and then as we grow older, we recognize that they're human beings with a lot of flaws. And so it explores some of that. We see a lot of that exploration throughout the film because like the father character is clearly depressed in some way, and is really disappointed with his life. And we don't get all of the details because it's predominantly through the reflection of this daughter who is only 11. But there is this dance scene that comes near the end where they just kind of are with one another and are having time together that feels very carefree, that doesn't feel the same as their interactions throughout the film, because the rest of the interactions feel like there's something charged or something awkward, because they maybe don't know how to be around each other but don't also know what words to put to what they're feeling with one another. And so they just kind of sit with something being off. And this is one of the only points in the film in which something is not off, that they just get to be. And I was like, shit, when that happens. I think even when the film itself ended, it's one that like it just completely tugs at your heartstrings. And I think specifically being a daughter who is very close with my own father, but recognizing kind of the same things that I saw in this journey of like, oh, but he's still a human being who has his own flaws, and remembering the times in which I saw that was like very much like emotionally impactful. Another really emotional scene that I'll just pair with it is from Banshees. So there is, and I think this has actually been going around on Twitter. At least I saw it pop up on my timeline. So it is between Barry Cohen's character and Carrie Condon's character. So the characters' names are Dominic and Siobhan. And as I mentioned a little earlier, Barry's character is like a menace, and he's a little creepy and says things that are pretty inappropriate, and has to this, to Siobhan, so Carrie Condon's character, before. But they have this scene by like a river, a little lake, a pond, a body of water of some sort. And he asks her, do you think, yeah, I'm not getting this right, but do you ever think that someone like you would ever, like or love somebody like me? And I think the build up to that particular scene, there's a lot in that, but it's just so well acted. And it's
Mm,
heartbreaking, especially, I'm not gonna spoil too much, but in where you see these characters go after this particular scene, where you start to maybe put a couple pieces together of like, oh, okay, that's what was happening kind of as they were interacting here. But it's just really heartbreaking because clearly he is impacted by just like this really difficult life that he's led, and she wants to be really sympathetic towards that and wants to be kind but honest at the same time. So she
mm,
answers no and does
mm.
so in a way that is, yeah, it was just like I was really just struck by that particular scene of like, oh shit, okay. Like,
Yeah.
so it felt like both of these scenes just gave me, but in a different way of like one felt more like, oh, I can connect to that. Um, and that's why I feel like emotionally impacted. And the other was just like, oh, this idea of like a human experience and what you do when you try to give feedback to people that they likely don't want to hear, but that you have to tell them
Hmm.
because you don't want to misrepresent or tell them a lie because the lie would maybe hurt more than the truth. And so, yeah, it was a great scene. And I think I'd seen it kind of float around Twitter, people just kind of praising the two of them. And it's only about 2-3 minutes long. And it's not a very long scene at all, but it was something that I really, really struck me this year as far as just like this is good acting, but it was also good writing.
Yeah. Those are good. And definitely sound like really moving. I don't even know how to follow it. I do think though, we've kind of mentioned Decision to Leave. So I kind of want to just spotlight, I think there's an opportunity to spotlight it just like a little more. As you had mentioned, Decision to Leave is a movie directed by Park Chan Wook, and it's kind of a bit of like a crime noir,
Mhm.
kind of like mystery movie that kind of really has like two mysteries at the heart of it. It kind of like felt like in a cool way like two movies that like kind of like back to back. And I think when it comes to mystery movies, this is something I had like kind of came up while talking to a friend. Like I think like the unpackaging, the unboxing of like and kind of like the reveal and like the answers to the mysteries is like so important for me. Like
Mhm.
those scenes when like they kind of make it clear like the answers to like kind of like what you've been like wondering like what's the truth here, like what's the answer to this mystery is like so important to me. Because when those scenes hit like out those movies are so much more impactful to me. Um, and so when they unpackage the first one, there's like a mystery about this like because he's like a cop, he's like a detective, and he's trying to figure out like how did this man die from like on top of like a large rock. And I won't spoil it because like this is really important to me, so I want everybody else who might be listening to this, who might be interested, to kind of like have that same uh kind of like impact that I felt. um when they kind of like reveal what actually went down, and they kind of like been hinting at like, oh, maybe it was this, maybe it was this, when they kind of reveal like this is how it happened, and kind of like this like scene that like flashes back, where the cop kind of like sees it for himself about like how it was, how it happened.
Mhm.
And I'm like talking in circles here, but because I am like sensitive to spoiling it. It just was so cool, and that scene
Mhm.
was like so cool. And then I'll say another scene. I can't quite remember the exact scene, but this that was like in the first half of the movie. In the second half, where you realize like um how much the kind of like the love interest affair type woman in the movie um was like kind of like in love with like our our cop character in kind of like this really twisted way. When that reveal also happens, and sorry to be so like on the surface here, um, that was also really impactful for me. That one like hit me more emotionally, where I was like, oh God, like, you know, I walked out of that movie just like in this weird twisted way of being like heartbroken. Because like the way the relationship kind of comes together, falls apart, and like kind of comes back together in this weird way. When all that kind of like is showcased and like a scene towards the end, I think it's just like, once again, like when, as you mentioned, like these heartstring pulling, gut wrenching kind of like parts, it's like where you're like kind of like trying to catch your breath after the end of the movie. Those are the best. Those are like absolutely reasons we go to the movies for. And so I thought Decision to Leave, which is like we'll definitely probably mention it like my top movies of the year, kind of like had like the best of it all, where it's like had like that gun wrenching, but also like that kind of you know, mystery box unraveling kind of scenes too.
Yeah, I really liked the end. I won't say anything, but the meaning in what it's left with, because it follows a theme and a piece of dialogue that the detective character had mentioned before about his career and kind of how it ends. I really liked how that was wrapped up, and yeah. Well, I'll quick mention a few other ones because I want to get to our top films. I don't know, like the last 40 minutes of Top Gun, just like
Yeah.
realistically. But if I were to mention one particular scene, just the was it 2 minutes and 15 seconds on the clock, and you know Tom Cruise is gunning the plane and trying to get through the little. That was great. Get through the simulation. Great.
Yeah,
Cheering in the theater.
when everybody's like, dude, it's impossible, you can't do it, nobody can do it, and yeah, Maverick's like goes and does it.
It's great. It's great.
So cool. So
cool. I think there's a lot of different scenes from Everything Everywhere that I can mention. But the one, again, I like things that kind of tug at my heart. I wanted to say in another life, I would.
The Rocks.
Well, yes, The Rocks,
You're
but also
The Rocks.
Yes, The Rocks is one.
Okay.
But also just I wanted to say in another life, I would have really liked just doing laundry in Texas with you. I was like,
yeah.
Come on, come on.
Yep.
So yeah, The Rocks, that particular scene, I think there were really cool like action set pieces. Just being able to move through the you know, multiverse stuff was really cool. But I like a good piece of dialogue, a good line read that makes me tear up. So
is it Ratatouille? Is it?
Yeah.
That's probably like my favorite joke of the year. So I'll just.
That was hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll mention quickly RRR, the dance at the party. That was lit.
Great. I could probably do a top 5 on RRR scenes alone, because there's so much good ones, like when they unlock like all the they turn the thing to unlock all the animals like flying out together, like
great.
Yeah, there's a lot in RRR when they like clasp hands under the bridge. There's once again, I'm not gonna do the top 5 here. I am trying, but yeah, lots of good scenes in RRR.
Any quick mentions for you?
I've already mentioned the Oprah shot in Nope.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. We haven't really talked about The Northman a lot, and that's another movie. We're quickly gonna get to like our top 5. That's another movie I really enjoyed, that I just like, haven't had the opportunity to speak to. It's like this weird thing. Do I like spoil like the game-changing moment in the movie? It's I think it's fine. Spoilers for The Northman. I think like a lot of that movie is like about revenge, and it's about like kind of making a promise to yourself when you're super young and like following up on it and like not stopping at nothing, and everything's kind of building to like this moment towards the end, where he kind of like decides that he's like willing to like go off with Anya Taylor-Joy's character and kind of like raise a family and kind of like just like live some like nice life and kind of just give up on his like revenge plot. And that's just not who this character is. And so the scene where he's like on the boat and he's just like, I gotta go back. I gotta get my revenge. I was just like, it was one of those where it's like a scene where you're like, oh, this is like so true to this character. I'm disappointed, but he has to do it because like this is who he is. So it's just like, I don't know. That was like and then he like goes back and gets his revenge and well, he realizes there was no fulfilling like this revenge kind of like thirst he had. You know what I mean? And yeah, I don't know. That scene where he like decides to turn around, like I love a movie that like builds up to like this kind of decision that can only be answered one way by the character you kind of like grow to understand. And so like that moment in that movie was really impactful for me. And yeah, I think that's it for now. Yeah. Those were some of the favorite scenes of the year.
So we'll transition to really our last kind of big category, which is just about films. We'll quickly talk about some that we found maybe disappointing or underwhelming, maybe some that were fun but flawed, and then we'll cap off with our top 5 each. So films that were disappointing, I'll quickly go through these because some have like a similar reason, at least for me, as far as what my list looks like. I don't know why it's so long. So sorry to these movies. So I had 3 films that were action films that just didn't hit for me. And the similarity between each of them is that they have really great casts that they didn't fully use. I don't know if the action set pieces felt like exciting in the ways that maybe RRR's was, or Everything Everywhere, or Top Gun, or The Northman, which had great fight choreography. It just kind of left me really lacking, and that is The Gray Man, Bullet Train, and The 355. Each of them have really like great folks on board, as far as The Gray Man having Chris Evans and Ryan Gosling and Ana de Armas, and Bullet Train having Brad Pitt. And I think the best part of the film was Brian Tyree Henry and Aaron Taylor Johnson's chemistry with one another as these twin assassin characters, and The 355 having Jessica Chastain and Lupita Nyong'o. And yeah, I just felt really underwhelmed by all 3 of them. I think there are films that are similar that did better from years past. And so I think I wanted more, and I didn't get what I wanted, and so just felt really disappointed by them existing and being put out in this way, because I think they could have been better with the people that they had to work with.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I think like, when you can kind of see like the potential, and it doesn't quite like hit the potential, I think that's like, the most disappointing for me, when it's like, oh, this movie doesn't seem like it's gonna be good, and then you go watch it and it's not good, you're kind of like,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
yeah, that's kind of like what I thought, you know what I mean? So I'm not gonna like keep harping on like one of the aforementioned movies that I've like expressed disappointment for. I think one that was like so kind of like, and I don't want to use like the word mid, but was just kind of like there for me, was Thor Love and Thunder, where it was just like, I went to see that movie and watched the movie and kind of left being like, all right, I just spent 2 hours doing something. You know what I mean? It was just like so like kind of just like washed over me and like left nothing. It was just like a gust of wind, and then it like disappeared. Because I think like, it's not like I had really high expectations, but at the very least, I thought I was gonna like love Christian Bale's like villain character. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, once again, not really like, I think overall felt disappointed that it didn't really like move me in any direction, but I was just like so kind of like, he did like in my eyes, he doesn't stand out amongst like many of the other MCU villains, which is like, I think disappointing when you think of like Christian Bale, like this person like loses himself in like so many of his like best roles. And So that was like disappointing. Another one was I think something a little more awardsy, Armageddon Time, filmed by James Gray. That was one where it definitely has like, this like great cast, like great pedigree, it stars Anne Hathaway and Jeremy Strong is like a mother and father. Anthony Hopkins is like this grandfather. And it's like the story pretty much like focused around like, a Jewish boy and like kind of befriending like this like black boy in school, and kind of like the Jewish boy kind of like understanding like kind of like their different places in the world. Like it takes place in the 80s, so it's a bit of a period piece. I believe it's right before the election of Ronald Reagan. And I thought the trailers were really good for this one. And it was kind of like, oh, this is that awardsy movie that's really going to like, slug me in the chest, and it's going to be like really good. And, I was like, I think I could really appreciate the performances, and I could appreciate the kind of like direction and kind of like the setting of that movie. But like overall, in terms of like, I think when I go to those type of movies, I expect like, whoa, like what? Like I never thought about like this. I was like moved emotionally, and it didn't quite hit any of those boxes for me. I think I was like more of like just appreciative. And it's like I didn't dislike the movie, but like in terms of like, once again, that like we're like, oh, it feels like there's like a lot of potential here that they could have like really gone somewhere deep. I didn't quite feel like it went anywhere deep to me, so I think those two overall were towards my more disappointing movies of the year.
The last one I'll mention is mainly because I liked his previous films, and so I went in with some excitement, is Men. So Alex Garland, who had previously directed Annihilation and Ex Machina, had Jessie Buckley, who was really wonderful. I'm not going to take anything away from her. And I think the filming of nature, which he's pretty known for, was beautiful. Just the lush green in these forests and etc. I thought that was really well shot. But I walked into the theater. I went with a friend, and we walked into the theater and kind of sat on one of the couches in the theater and like Googled what the fuck happened. We were just like, what was we had ideas about what it was trying to tell us, but like we wanted to make sure, and just like it was just really disappointing, and it wasn't exactly what I thought. And considering how much I liked his previous two films that I mentioned, I had some disappointment because I liked those films so much, and I didn't care for this one. So
I'm also a fan of his previous films. I think I showed the trailer to I don't know, some like my women friends, and they were like, I don't want to watch this. And I was like, I can understand that, it's like it's like for me, it was like, oh, they're gonna capture like how terrible like men are, like, don't you want to watch this? It's like, no, I know, like, no, this like this doesn't seem appealing to me. And I was like, oh, okay, true. So I never got around to that one, but I did, like, just because I'm a fan of his like previous work too. That was like high up on my list, but like after trying to recruit some people to watch it with me, I didn't get around to it. So
that's okay.
Yeah.
Any films that you thought had some flaws or inconsistencies, but found them to be fun regardless, or overall?
I think there were like honestly plenty. Like there was like, I know we've like talked about how like the movie this year overall was like, in my eyes, like I said, back from last year, like a lot of the blockbusters didn't like hit these like super highs. I mean, like, I think that's all still true, but there was like plenty of movies that I was still like had fun with. I had fun with Uncharted. I had fun with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I think I thought both of those were kind of like, just they weren't going for like this like epic like movie, like the way the MCUs are like tied to like 15 other different things. They're just like, let's like have a fun adventure. And Sonic the Hedgehog 2 did like you know, hey, we're introducing Knuckles. You know what I mean? It's just like it kind of like stayed in its lane and like kind of knew what it was. And I think it led to like both those being very fun. And then I think like I've already mentioned, like, Don't Worry, Darling. I don't know, had a lot of fun with that one. You know, it's like I can like recognize, I think, some of the flaws in it. And I can see why some people weren't able to like connect with it. But overall, I don't know. I think I was like, maybe I just like didn't quite see the flaws, but the flaws didn't connect with me. Um, I think those were ones that in the theater I had like a great time with. So how about you?
Ambulance was
Yeah, it's a good
chaotic
one.
and hectic, and Jake Gyllenhaal at his full like frantic energy level. What I don't even know how to don't even know how to describe, but I thought it was a lot
Yeah.
of fun. And then Bones and All, I think had some problems, and I think had really good performances. And there were pieces of it that I really liked, despite it being a cannibal romantic drama road trip story thing. But I
Yeah.
kind of liked it, to be honest. I don't know what it says about me that two of the films I like to see are cannibal-esque movies as far as Fresh and Bones and All are concerned. But and another is The Menu. I didn't know anything
Yeah.
about it going in. I went to a theater and watched it alone. There was no one that was, I guess, interested in seeing it on a Tuesday night. But I thought it was really, really fun. Like there were moments I genuinely like laughed out loud. Like my laughter was reverberating around this empty theater.
Hmm.
I just had a really good time. I think Ralph Fiennes was really good. I think Anya Taylor-Joy was great, and um, yeah, I think it was a fun movie and a nice quick watch too. I don't think we're seeing too many things that are under 2 hours, and it was under 2 hours and a good time. So
That is always nice. Yeah, when they kind of keep it tight. I do like that too.
yeah, yeah. Well, we're
Is it
we're
time?
at yeah, it's top five time. If folks have
Okay.
gotten to this point of the podcast, we
Yeah,
appreciate it.
we're only 45 minutes in, right? Like
Yeah, it's the and if anything, we can let folks know that they could jump ahead if they need to. But
yeah.
top fives. So we
Okay.
may share some, we may not share some. I think that's what's fun about this.
Yeah. And maybe
And after,
we can give a shout out to like maybe a couple others
yeah,
if we
yeah. I
after.
was gonna say, we'll have our top five and then mention maybe a few more that we recommend to folks. I will say I wrote mine not as like five, four, three, two, one. I think,
Oh, really? Yeah.
yeah, I
Okay.
realized I hadn't done that. But maybe
Yeah.
it's kind of, now that I look at it.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. I definitely have mine in order.
Okay. Okay.
Because I keep my letterbox favorite rankings like throughout the year and update it. And then like if like I start to feel better about a movie like throughout the year, I was like, oh, this one's sticking with me more. I might like move it up. If like it loses like it's kind of like stickiness with me, I might move it down. Or might refresh my memory about what I really enjoyed about it and then like be like, oh yeah, no, it does deserve to be here. So I do
Okay.
have mine in order.
Maybe mine's somewhat now that I'm looking at my letterbox too, as far as like my ratings, and I think it's sort of in order.
Yeah,
Maybe.
just know like once we say it, like it's forever out there in the ether. We can never go back and change it. It's so no pressure. Um, do you want me to go first
You
and
can
give
go
you
first.
my number five?
Give me your number five.
Okay, I think this is kind of fun because like we've been talking about like so many movies and like kind of like the film industry as a whole. It's like where do they land on their top five? So number five is Everything Everywhere All at Once. We've talked about this movie in multiple different angles in terms of like its box office success, like its word of mouth, kind of like the different performances we really enjoyed, the different moments, like yeah, and I think it like, this movie like absolutely has it all. I think it's just like so unique. And so like felt like of a I was gonna say a single person's mind when it's like two directors. But it just like has such like a unique energy. It's like unlike so many different movies I think of like of a lot of the movies of like the past, like however many years you want to go back, you know. And at the same time, it still has like that kind of like mother-daughter storyline at its like heart. And I think like does a lot. And yeah, just like comes together to just be like kind of like the complete package. It's like, as we said, it's like you leave that movie being like, yo, that's the movie. This is why we go to the theaters. So that is my number 5.
Okay. I think, like I
Here we
said,
go.
I did not categorize these, but I'll start with I guess my number 5 will be The Banshees of Inisherin.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, it's about two friends who have been friends for many decades. One who is a farmer, the other who is like a musician. He's a violinist or some kind of string instrument. The musician played by Brendan Gleeson, decides that he no longer wants to be friends with Colin Farrell's character and ends the friendship. And Colin Farrell's character is devastated, and then it just follows kind of that trying to rekindle or spark this friendship again, and what some of that looks like. So Martin McDonagh had done his last film was Three Billboards, which I actually did not like.
Oddly enough, I kind of like that one. I don't know. I didn't think I would, and kind of did. It's a weird one though. It's a weird one.
I didn't quite connect with that one. This one, I was like, yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Just really, really solid script with great dialogue delivered by wonderful actors. I think the four main actors being Brendan Gleeson, Colin Farrell, Barry Cohen, and Kerry Condon, who I've already mentioned before, I think all just work really wonderfully together. I think there's some parts, as far I mentioned one scene by the lake, but there is a scene in a bar that's really good. And there is sort of a gory element. I don't want to like completely spoil or give away compared like to Brendan Gleeson's character, where he says if Colin Farrell's character does not stop trying to be friends with him, he will do something to himself. And it leads to, yeah, just kind of an unexpected, kind of horrifying type element of like, oh, okay, we're going this far to try to not maintain this relationship. And yeah, it's just a really, really fascinating look into like male friendship. And we've actually had a couple movies like that this year, which I think is fascinating. But yeah, and it just takes place on an island, so it's so isolated from just like everyday life. It's a period piece, you know. So a lot of it that, frankly, probably on the surface wouldn't have resonated with me, but in watching it, I was like, oh yeah, this yeah, these are all the things I like: good acting and a tight script, and just the back and forth between a lot of these characters. And I think Colin Farrell really takes the reins. Brendan Gleeson's character is a bit more reserved. So you just get to see people cook, and it's great.
Yeah.
So that'll be my number 5.
Very cool. Okay. My number 4 is Decision to Leave. You know, we were just speaking about like kind of like this movie's like structure, and how it's like a crime noir, and how it's like, you know, has like these like beautiful scenes where they like unpack like the mystery. You know, and I don't know if I have like much more to add about it, but like besides to say like the kind of like scene by scene, like the characters are just like so engrossing. You know what I mean? Like these are like kind of people like by the end of it, you're just like you got almost like miss in a way, because you like just like kind of like spent so much time with and like connected to. You know, I would like this cop character whose name I could probably like look up really quickly. You know, you just like become so close. It's like Hey June is the season's detective. So it's just like, yeah, just like by the end of it, I think it's like done everything you like want a movie to do. It's giving you like kind of like it's giving you like romantic scenes, giving you like edge of your seat scenes, and it's like, you know, have like the emotional scenes. It's just like a total package movie. And I don't know, just like in terms of like these like crime noir films that like I think like feel like of a different generation. Like I think like kind of shows you this movie kind of shows you like, you know, they still have like a place in like the greater film culture, and because this one's like super successful. So that is my number four. Your number four is
Okay. Good Maverick. I
okay.
really liked this film.
Yeah,
And yeah, you know, a good blockbuster will still get me. I think I had some other films on my list. I was like, this could probably be number four. But you know what? It's rewatchable. I've already watched it multiple times. I asked for it for Christmas. I wanted a physical copy because I wanted to physically pop it in whenever I cared to. I
nice.
can pop on any point of this film and just be immediately invested and have a really good time. And there's something about this blend of familiarity of the characters and some nostalgia. I actually didn't care much for the first Top Gun, but at least I knew what was going on because I knew who these people were. But the familiarity blended with like practical effects, which I always prefer over CGI and computer generated, the various, you know, I know it has its place and I want people to be as safe as possible. And I respect to the CGI artists out there, but there's something about a good practical effect that really gets me. And the
Mm-hmm.
plane sequences were fire. They were so good. And, you know, I think Tom Cruise, this is what he makes, and he's good at it. And he waited until he could get it into theaters with the big release, and I'm so glad that he did. And you know, frankly, I think some of my favorite within the last, I say, like 20 years of his career, I think this and Mission Possible Fallout and Edge of Tomorrow are some of my favorites from him. And I think it's just him being the action star and getting cooking and doing the stunts and being all in. Um, I like the film. So
Yeah,
it's my number four.
nice. Um, yeah, very cool. Also love Top Gun. Just kind of like, you know, didn't quite crack my top five. But no, not Top Gun. My number three is another movie I've mentioned. All of these should come at no surprise by this point. It is RRR. Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about it a bit, but I mean, just to kind of like bring it home, I think this movie's length is intimidating, but I think it's like the length is like two. It's like, it's like so much so helpful to it, because I think if you're, especially like being an American who's used to like kind of like American kind of rhythms and story beats, sort of thing, I think it takes you a bit to kind of like accept kind of like what this movie is trying to do, and to kind of like, I think I mentioned getting on its wavelength and stuff like that. And so all the setup they're doing, all the patience they're displaying before they like have like these two main characters meet, um as long as it takes to get to the title sequence, as long as it takes to understand like what kind of movie you're in and like the direction it's going in, it's all purposeful and all, benefits like kind of where it eventually gets to. Because once it's just like, the action kind of like having fun, kind of like over the top zaniness, it kind of like begins to display, you're not like, wait, what is this? Why is it doing this? You're just like, yes, yes, yes. And once you're there, it's like truly just like such a joyride. It's like such a joyride, like highly recommend it. It's like, once again, easily accessible on Netflix. There's a chance it might get another small theatrical run if it gets like some Oscar nominations. So if you want to hold off, there's a chance you could see it in theaters. But highly recommend watching this movie, because easily want to, once again, like similar to Everything Everywhere, just like such a unique kind of like fun time that's not like super niche or like, it's like it's a big fun movie, and like who doesn't want to enjoy a big fun movie? So That's my number three. Back to you, Dr. Rika.
Tar is my number
Mm,
three.
yes.
I think we've spoken about spoken about at least Cate Blanchett. To give a small introduction, just follows a what is she Lydia Tarr, who is considered to be the greatest modern composer and conductor, I should say, of just classical music and whatnot. And so
Yeah.
she has a lot of power within her field, and within the story, she's like an EGOT winner, and
Yeah,
you
she
know,
is.
and so she is intending to record a symphony that she has not gotten around to doing yet, as she's trying to complete a set. Um, and then things start to kind of fall apart around her because she flies a little too close to the sun.
Hmm.
And I think it's really interesting watching where she's at in the very start and where she ends up at the very end. And just the story of like what it means to have power and how one wields it. Um, and we've just mentioned already, I'm like Cate Blanchett, just like it's her movie. She is the center of this. She is playing Lydia Tarr. She is the center of all of what happens, and takes it in stride. It's just a wonderful, wonderful performance. And just the movie itself is, I think, more intricate than it seems on the surface. I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's about cancel culture. And I think that the quote cancel culture element is like one small piece of like a bigger pie of like, again, this idea of power and like what it means to be like just maybe just not a good person. Like some people are
Yeah.
just like shitty humans, and
Hmm.
it's nothing, and eventually for some folks accountability, it comes up and their life is impacted in that way. But like I think it's really, it was fun for me to just watch the film and like try to figure out like, okay, is she actually great? Is she good at what she does? Because we actually very rarely see her in this conductor role. Like it's about all the other pieces of her life.
Mm.
And so I feel like someone else described it as like so I'm not taking credit for this, of like a Rorschach test of like you get the info and you interpret it in the way that you want to interpret it. And it was really fun for me to do that, of like, ooh, okay, she's like cruel and very unkind, and it feels like there's only one part of her life that she actually holds any like positive feelings towards that I could connect with, which was her being like this mother.
Yeah.
Um, and so her connection with her daughter, but like everything else, I'm like, man, you're like actually just like a really icky person. But
Yeah.
it was so fascinating to watch that all unravel. So Tar.
No, that's like triggered my own thoughts about Tar, which is also like kind of like very close, right? Outside my top five. Because like I definitely left that movie and be like, oh, she's like a bad person, like just like totally bad person. And then I think somebody else had pointed out, like, you never see her do anything bad. You know what I mean? Like all of it's hearsay, all of it's like, which is like so interesting that like, the movie decided never to confirm to you on screen if she is this person. You know what I mean? It's like, once
Mhm.
again, you kind of like you're left to your own kind of like way of interpreting it. And I think it just like overall is like a movie, and Cate Blanchett's performance is just like sticks with you. I saw that like months ago and I'm still like, whew, still taken aback when I just like think about like certain scenes in that movie where she's just like, firing on all cylinders. And yeah, it's just like, I think like, I don't know. I think like, yeah, cancel culture plays a role, but I think like the discussions around the movie like feel like even more important than like maybe like the exact thing it might have been trying to say.
Yep.
So yeah, great pick. So I'm at two. Okay. I feel like I spoiled all mine in like my scenes. So here's number two. Um, it had been like kind of flipping back and forth with it. It's been flipping back and forth between this slide and three with RRR. But I think it is The Northman. Is my number two. That one, I think like in terms of like just like an epic kind of like macho kind of like Viking going on a revenge quest. Like, I think it's easy for this movie just to kind of be, just like almost like too bro and kind of just like, just like watching him like, you know, beat people up and stuff like that. But I think there's so much artistry to this movie too. I think there's like just kind of like the way it kind of like tells its story, like who Anya Taylor-Joy's character is. I think Bjork has like plays like this kind of like witch kind of like person in the movie, and like there's so many like kind of like cool like different elements that really make it feel like it's of like, it's like the script is like handwritten from like some like long ago like text that was like found. You know what I mean? Like it's just like it's not going for like the easy blockbuster Viking movie. It's not going for kind of like the broad kind of like action Viking kind of like movie you could almost imagine it being. It's being like, no, we're gonna try to stay true to like kind of like exactly like the beats, characters, rhythms, like and vibes that this like world was about. Um, and then I think there's like so many cool elements of like I think the person behind you, Nicole Kidman's character, like has like a really cool like
Yeah.
kind of like reveal about like her character and her past, and like they're just like, I don't know, there's like so many cool moments like that kind of like on their own I think are like unique and like thought provoking, and I think it's just like to have it in what in essence it still has all the action kind of like you want out of your action Viking movie, but to have everything in like kind of this action Viking movie packaging just makes it like super, like makes it my second favorite movie of the year. So really enjoy that movie. It definitely came out pretty early in the year and has like stuck with me, so I think is a pretty good sign. So number two, The Northman.
I Nicole Kidman's kind of reveal in that I thought was a really, like you said, it's not it on the surface it could seem like kind of a typical like historical type epic, swords movie.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but I think it's a little deeper than that. And Roger Eggers,
Robert Eggers, I
Robert,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, Robert
But
Eggers. I'm double
sorry,
checking. Robert Eggers. We nailed it.
yes,
Yes, we did.
sorry, man. I think this feels like maybe of the films he's created, the most like mainstream friendly. But even so, there's elements
Yeah,
to kind of chew on there. So
absolutely.
that's a good pick. My second is Nope.
Mm,
So of course,
good movie.
third feature film by Jordan Peele. We've already kind of talked about it multiple times thus far. What I will say is, again, as I mentioned previously, it's something that kind of I sat with and let marinate. Um, but upon letting that happen, it allowed me to just reflect on how much I enjoyed this film, and just this idea and exploration of like spectacle while also being a spectacle movie, and what it means to like be in the moment versus trying to capture everything. Um, what exploitation and kind of the impact of that, and how we treat each other, how we treat animals. And yeah, it was just it was a great time. Like it was so well filmed and just aesthetically incredibly pleasing. I think the scene that we hadn't mentioned, I know you mentioned kind of the Oprah shot, but the house and like the blood and the kind of that horror element, and this isn't like his scariest film, but I think it's certainly the most, it feels like thoughtful in terms of like thinking of each element, and everything means something. Um, And when I compare it to say like Us or Get Out, it's like Get Out is probably still my favorite of the three. I think Us had its issues, but still it was really good in my opinion. But this felt like this is absolutely what he'd been trying to build towards as far as what he'd like to see out of himself as a filmmaker. And I'm excited to see where this goes now that we see his capabilities in this. But I think a lot of people have compared it to like Spielberg films and what it means to kind of explore this like one big element and then unpack it and unravel it, and be creative along the way. And yeah, I just had a really good time with it. We've already mentioned Kiki and Daniel just being really great leads, but I think a lot of the supporting performances were great too. Um, and yeah, I think any movie that makes me kind of want to think more about it when I leave the theater, I think is a good sign, and this was one of them. Um, so yeah, nope.
Great pick. Great pick. It leads me to my number one, which is Nope. In my Letterboxd review, I said, "Yup," and that was my review. And so, no, I mean, like, yeah, like, what else can I even like add on? It's a spectacle of a movie about capturing spectacles, and I think I think there's just like a magic to this movie where I think like every kind of director choice I think like is just like perfect in this weird kind of way. Like everything from like the little flag thing kind of like dripping down from like the spaceship, you know, all the like inflatable people in like the big open field on the farm, is like so cool. The elements of like the horse and like, you know, their family tracing their lineage back to like the first like I guess black actor who has ever like filmed on screen. You know, it's just like and even like the monkey stuff, like it, which I understand can be jarring to some people, um, just also kind of like I don't know, like tied in so cool with like the western kind of like everything. I'm just like listing all the elements of the movie. I'm just saying like I loved all of it. But you know, it's just like this like I think it weirdly just all comes together, even despite them kind of like being so different. Like an inflatable arm tube man. Like you know what I mean? Like who would think that visually would be like perfect to have in like your shot of like this open field, but like it is. It just kind of like it like works so well. And I don't know. I think not to like repeat myself or anything. So I'll try not to. So I'll just add that I just kind of felt like Jordan Peele was just like has been growing and growing as like a filmmaker, and it just felt like he was just like firing on all cylinders. Like I don't know how you come up with like some of the things he comes up with in this movie in terms of like kind of like the child actor having his own like kind of like western kind of like park on the outskirts of Hollywood, to the monkey, um, to like yeah, you know, everything happening in this movie, just like so cool. In a movie like I think I saw 2 days later, and to go with another friend to be like, no, you have to see this. I'll go again. You know, that's how I like immediately knew like this was like something special. Um, so yeah, it's like my number one. And I also just want to shout out how funny it was. It was really funny. You know what I mean? It was like a really funny movie. So plenty of great jokes, plenty of great lines. A lot of them coming from Kiki, but you know, Jordan Peele, surprise, surprise, still a funny person. So, and that is my number one in my top five. Dr. Rico, take us home.
Yeah, everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
Everything that I enjoy about movies was in this particular movie. Um, I like kind of weird, creative sci-fi things happening, and that we got that with multiverse exploration. I like kind of complicated characters that we kept that are still very like grounded and like I could point somebody out like that is like that. So as far as like the Michelle Yeoh's character of like a mother who is, an immigrant just trying your best, and maybe doesn't always do things that feel helpful, beneficial, or perceived as helpful or beneficial, at least on the child's end. So kind of that exploration of just like generations and what it means to like be in a relationship with people that you maybe don't like all the time because they don't always do things in a way that you think is in the way that you would, or that is maybe kind or compassionate, and feeling some resentment towards that, but like it's also still somebody that you love, so you're trying to make it work, and that's human, it happens all the time. But also it's built in this like crazy fun world of like multiverse, like people that exist in other universes, and getting in touch and exploring all of that. um I think just like there were parts that made me laugh and parts that I teared up at, and things that were really unexpected, and things that felt very just like out there, as far as like, well, there was a fight with like sex toys, and the sex toys were the weapons, and I was like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
for it.
Uh-huh.
And just like the hot dog fingers and the rocks, and like none of it, like I never would have kind of thought of this, and I'm glad somebody did, because then I got to enjoy it. And so yeah, I had such a great time watching this. It's another film I mentioned a little earlier about physical media that I have on DVD that I can pop in whenever I care to, um, and will happily do so, because I had such a good time watching this, and that is my number one of the year. So
Nice. Pretty good top five.
yeah, I think so, on both of our ends. Anything that you wanted to quickly mention that weren't in our top five, but is worth folks giving a shot or a try?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned Tar was just outside my top five. The Batman was actually like my number six, so this is still the Yonko table, like, so I'll shout out the Batman real quick, a superhero film. And outside of that, I think I've mentioned Babylon a couple times. It is a very interesting movie, and I think I'm still processing it. And I think I might, I don't think I'll see it in theaters again, but I think like I won't come to any hard conclusions about how I exactly feel about it until like I see it again. So I'll also shout out that one. Because yeah, just like a very interesting film. Yeah, I think those. I think yeah,
Okay.
the Batman of
Uh,
Babylon. How about yourself?
I mentioned it when we talked about favorite scenes, but After Sun, it's a short watch, directed by a woman. Again, it's very much like no plot, all vibes. But I think it's so there's not like a lot there's not like a big like action or big moment, beyond kind of what I described a little earlier as far as like a big emotional moment. But I think there's something about sitting with two characters and seeing them explore their relationship that felt kind of resonant for me. Barbarian was a really great time. I'm not going to say anything because I think everyone should walk into that film. It's on HBO Max, without knowing anything. All you need to know is it is a horror-esque film, um, and there are some surprises, and I think it's just a really fun, creative movie. Because we are the Onco table, I imagine we like Robert Downey Jr. His documentary about him and his father's relationship, Senior, is on Netflix. That was really good. And then something else that's on Netflix that I really liked was The Sea Beast. So it is an animated film, about it's kind of like a pirate type film with like sea monsters, and it was just it felt like a throwback to kind of old adventure movies, but it's just an animated film, and it was really cute. And sometimes you just want something that's easy to watch, that's fun and very cute. And I think the Sea Beast kind of fits that bill. I thought it's worth watching and checking out. I really liked that. Um,
Yeah, somehow that one like it like flew up on my radar and then quickly like disappeared off of it. I remember like seeing like a text or two about it, and then like poof, like it stopped popping up on my Netflix feed. And nice. No, I think that's a great. Those are some great shout outs. So
well, fun things for folks to watch. But I believe we've actually kept people here for 3 hours, but that feels like it matches what the film industry has done to us in terms of
Yes.
Avatar,
Which is so funny. I think that's our
Babylon.
first. Is that our first mention? I think we maybe mentioned James Cameron. That's our first mention of Avatar.
You know, I will say what I can say is we do have an Avatar Way of Water episode on the
Yes.
podcast feed, so you can check that
Yes.
out. It, I don't think it was great. I also don't think it was bad, but
Yeah.
not, it didn't feel like I needed to spend some extra time talking about it since there were so many other things we got to shout out along the way.
I think it's telling it took us to hour 3 to like bring up. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it might be the highest grossing movie that comes out this year. I think is how you would word it.
Mhm.
To like account that'll probably surpass Top Gun in 2023.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm I think I'm almost like reserving my overall thoughts about it because like it feels like it's setting so much up in the next one.
Yeah.
Um, which is similar to a movie. Here's my attempt at a segue. That came out last year that's getting its sequel in 2023 that I'm really excited for. Um,
Dune.
Dune too. Yes. Um, yeah, and so and like kind of like to kind of tie this up, and not keep people here too much longer, and put a bow on things. Maybe we could just speak on a couple movies that we're excited for in the next year. I think Dune 2 might be at the top of my list. I think the movie I'm most excited for. I think I really enjoyed the world of the first one. It felt like there was like a lot of table setting.
Mm.
Um, it felt like, I enjoyed my introduction to some of these characters. Um, I enjoyed the 5 minutes we got with Zendaya's character. Um, Looking forward to spending maybe 6 minutes with her in the second one. And I think Timothy Chalamet as the lead was like kind of like fantastic in terms of like just like being able to kind of like be this person we kind of follow into this world.
Mm.
But the movie, in terms of like going places or like plot wise or like it was so much like not a full movie that I was like just like I enjoyed my experience with it, but I couldn't quite comfortably judge it. So I'm looking forward to this one, the second one, which I believe ties up I guess like the first book of the series of books. Is my understanding. So I don't know. Very interested in seeing like kind of where it goes, kind of like what all this table setting was for.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that's probably my. I'm not doing any ranking here, but that's probably the movie I'm like most excited for coming out in 2023. How about yourself?
I would agree as far as excitement around Dune 2. I actually just rewatched Dune Part 1 because my dad hadn't seen it. He was visiting, and another movie that I got physically.
Nice.
Um, I really loved the first one, so I'm excited for the second. I'll quickly run down. I just looked up a 2023 list. I'll
Okay.
quickly run down the ones that I'm excited about beyond Dune 2. John Wick 4, Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1,
Yep.
um, Barbie. I am excited
Really excited for
for.
Barbie.
I
Really
am
excited for
excited for
Barbie.
Barbie. Of course, we mentioned Spider-Verse. I do look forward to that. And then you know what? I'm excited for The Little Mermaid. You
I'm
know,
I'm I want the first full trailer. I want they give us a little tease. Thought it looked good. I'm excited for Lin Manuel Miranda's songs, um, which I understand he's like adding a couple of additions to. But I want the first trailer. That's it. I mean,
yeah,
I've been pretty critical of Disney's
live
um
action.
live action adaptations. I kind of liked Aladdin. You know what? I liked Aladdin. I will just come out and say it. I liked Aladdin, and I think that's like the most positive thing I can say about any of those movies is that I liked one of them. So, you know, um, I am excited. I guess I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see it. But I'm keeping my expectations like in check. You know, I'm trying to not expect the world out of another Disney adaptation attempt. So, but that is a good one. That is a good one.
I just figured I mention it because I know we'll talk about it on the podcast.
Oh, that'll be a big one. That'll be a big one. I'll just add on. I don't know. You're running through it. I don't know if you had said Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's new movie. We had already mentioned Creed 3 earlier. The Super Mario Brothers movie is an animated one I'm excited for. And then I don't know if you had mentioned, I think we're getting the Aquaman sequel next year. I know DC's
they're
things.
Restructuring.
So. They're doing things. But I really liked the first Aquaman.
I did like the first one, yeah.
It was just like fun, you know, it was kind of like had like a bit of a James Bond kind of like Mission Impossible globe trotting kind of feel to it, which was like did not see that coming for like my Aquaman superhero movie. I thought some of the underwater stuff looked really good, which was also surprising. I know we've kind of like now seen like multiple underwater kind of universe. Yeah, you know what I mean? But like, I don't know, you know, Aquaman was a bit of ahead of its time in this kind of current trend. So I don't know. I think James Wan is returning. I really liked his like first take on it. So kind of interested to see how he can like expand the world and you know just kind of I have no idea what DC is gonna do in terms of like when the restart happens, if this Aquaman will be a part of it, don't know. But I'm excited for that one. So 2023, I think it's gonna be, come on, I'll say I think it's gonna be a better year than 2022. Maybe it's easy to say that now when you're looking at it, but like I'm really excited for this next slate of movies. Oh, Indiana Jones 4 looks interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot kind of on the horizon.
Yeah,
that'll I think will be some that are going to be like big blockbusters that hopefully pay off, some smaller films that look intriguing, and I'll be at the theater to watch it all.
Absolutely. Same.
Well, that is the podcast. I guess I should give it an outro to follow us on all of our social media platforms. I believe we are on YouTube and Spotify and Facebook and TikTok and Twitter and Instagram. And then you can listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can subscribe.
Yes.
You can subscribe to the Patreon.
Oh, yes.
And I think you can follow us on the Discord.
We have a Discord where we talk about things.
Professional podcasters here, totally not our first time.
Yep. So, give us either subscribe to us, give us some feedback, speak to us. We recognize that this was over 3 hours, but you know what? You can watch it on 2 times. And you wouldn't know that because we're saying this at the very end. But and check out some of our other episodes as well, where a lot of the movies that we talked about we have actually also covered and then some. So we cover anime and video games and movies and TV shows and things beyond
and
that.
We're leaning into more awardsy filmy stuff too. So it's all everything's on the table.
Yes, we're trying to be, you know, everywhere, all at once.
Yes,
at the Yonko table.
Well done.
Well, we appreciate you checking us out and taking a listen if you've gotten this far, and that'll be all for now.
Yes, until next time, maybe we'll be back for a little Oscar preview or Oscar recap.
One of those.
Okay.
I hope so.